Welcome to Arc Rex Temple of Ages, part 13.5. Welcome back, everybody, and happy holidays. Thank you for joining us, and to any new people just finding this video and channel for the first time. This is a very long process of many theories put together, and I encourage anyone to go back and watch those videos in order. And if you have any questions about topics or the names of them or what they're about, I can go into that, and you can put timestamps and things like that. So without further ado, hello everybody. I'm back. And greetings and salutations. I like saying it a bunch of different ways, and even to the evil out there, hey, it's me, your boy. And to the good as well. I like both sides of the coin. And just to speak to the delays, like even making this video, I didn't think I'd be making this right now because everything's just so, topsy-turvy lately, and just delays inside of randomness and chaos, and it just, keeps going on. And just the upkeep of life lately, and just, it seems like there's so little time and so many things to do, and part of me just wonders, like, why do you make these, and why are you trying to set like a record right now and make the longest presentation you've ever made that's 777 slides in one go? A lot of reasons, and I wanted to break it down into smaller pieces, yet I found this meme right here that, sometimes you have to give them the whole thing, and if they choke on it, that's on them. And, this might be a good holiday gift to somebody out there, who knows? And I would also love more feedback of any kind and comments. I've been grateful for those so far, and like the Lego movie in this I'll talk about later on was because a viewer suggested that, and I'd love to keep doing that as well, but it's been pretty quiet lately. But I can understand that because of the holidays. And it's just also interesting, while I was making this, I noticed a reflection between the original series I did and this one, that in the part 4, Row, Row, Row Your Boat, I went really deep into the ideas, and in the 5th one, I kind of brought it back to our day-to-day lives and where this is all going and the implications of all of that on a more micro level. And it's interesting that this is a lot like a fusion of those, and will probably be as long as these put together, and maybe even a little longer. But I kind of want to test myself and see if I can get it all done in one go. And I think once I get it going, a lot of these topics are going to merge together. And a lot of you are probably from the Levette channel, and I'm very happy that she's back. Yet, I found it very interesting that 2 of her most recent videos are about focusing on the smaller day-to-day things in life and maybe not looking at the big picture. Yet, it's a balance of each. And, even those amongst us that have been doing this for years are getting overwhelmed at the moment and just needing to take a moment because it's just everywhere. It'll be interesting because I'll be talking about The Simpsons later with this as well. And it's interesting because it's just, in a lot of ways, I felt like I've been stuck in a rut lately. And, I'm very good at working my way out of those step by step. Yet it can be hard to see that in the moment, especially with all the craziness in the world, that it's interesting that I can look at almost every aspect of my life, and that it seems like I'm maturing in a moral way, yet just with all the world, it can be hard to see that and credit it. And this meme from Dumb and Dumber, when I hear mud tires coming down the road, and this is when he says, so you're saying there's a chance that the cavalry is on the way, that the good vibration hasn't been lost in all this madness. And in all this madness, I've been unfortunately dissociating a bit, and maybe not the most ever in my life, but in this kind of weird way that even if I'm trying to be happy and pragmatic, that just the overall vibration and where we're at right now just kind of has this effect because it's just so weird right now. And another meme right here, and we're going to be talking a lot about frogs as well and magic, and just in our society that we're not really allowed to tell the truth. We're not allowed to vent what's really on the inside, because we know if we do, that usually people won't want us around because they want to maintain that status quo. Yet we're all in this together. So I know there's others out there like me. They're having a really hard time and might be really isolated right now. So I hope we can all come together and enjoy this wherever we are, even if it's only a few people. And I've been noticing that no matter where I turn in life, these topics are just reverberating. And that's a big reason why I want to make this presentation, because I still haven't seen anyone that quite does what I do. And not to make it about who's special and who's not, yet if you think you can make something new and put together the Lego pieces of life in a different way that might help other people and help them mature spiritually and might lead to a better story in the end, then I think that's a good idea. But just how overwhelming it is lately, just from every angle. And that I kind of made this around Thanksgiving, and it's almost already been a month already, but it feels like way less than then at the same time. That you're supposed to put on a mask and say everything's fine even if it isn't. And not everyone has, some people are doing better in life, yet they want to ignore a lot of what's going on in the world, and I can understand that. Yet I found in my life that pretty much at no point do they actually come at you when it's not Thanksgiving. Like, because it's Thanksgiving, they want everyone to be happy because everyone's gathered together and this is a special time, and they don't really want to dampen the mood, and I understand that. It's just that if you never go to the person that you saw was wearing a mask and everything wasn't obviously all right and help them out a little bit, or at least, say something nice or try to communicate with them, but you just keep expecting every holiday that they put on a show for you, but you will never even kind of reach out and talk to them. And there's this meme right here with the mask, and this one's kind of reversed. Yet more and more I want to put what's on the inside outside, and not let the inside so much. I don't know, it's hard to define that. And we'll really go into this later on about what you hide inside isn't going to be hidden anymore. And a big part of this as well is me kind of getting the first move on that and saying, to the universe and everything that I'm not perfect, but, I've been trying. And thank you all for being here, because I can't really go and talk to anyone else about this. And this is why I made this channel, is because I tried it the physical way, and here we all are. And not that it won't go back to that, it's just where we're at right now. And it's funny how it uses all my talents in life too. And I want to get back to the presentation with fair weather friends, because that's so much of life that people want to say how great of friends they are, and they'll ride or die for you. And when the time comes and the rain starts pouring, hey, where'd they go? And I've been getting this with my own family lately, the idea of conditional love, of asking, what have you done for me lately? That there's this veneer of this great family and all these smiles, but underneath it, if you actually ever try to vent that real self and try to talk about it, you'll just pretty much get shut down immediately. And that's what's been happening to me. And just how they can push my buttons, and that's their immediate response. Like, I went to one of my family members about, like, hey, could you not push my buttons in this way? It happened in our last conversation, and just immediately pushed one of my biggest buttons that I've made apparent to them many times, and tried to have communicate with them many times that it'd be nice if they didn't do that, because it doesn't make me feel good. And this is a movie from Elf where he presses every button, and it just amazes me that it can be a random person or even your family, and sometimes it's even worse, because people in your family have that idea that they can treat you any way they want, because, your family. And not to go too deep in the weeds right there, but that I think venting's important, and I don't want to just complain, yet if something's going on, and especially if it's abusing me and pushing my buttons, especially in an emotional way, that I would like to talk about that. And this whole presentation and just life feels like this in my life, that it's like this fire, and most people are like, oh my gosh, and I'm just like, here, let's point out all the details. Yet that's how you fix it. And there's this meme I always think of, that this dog, or the serious dog, is in this house and it's on fire, and he says, this is fine. And here's a real life version of it about dealing with trauma. And there's a reverse of this meme as well. And there's also another meme where he freaks out and says this isn't fine because he's like melting. And I think there's a balance to it all. And just the idea of serious with the flame right here. And I always think of this meme a lot. We are the universe experiencing itself. And that goes into some really weird places when you get to it. And just a quick note, sorry to anyone how I say my P's. I know it kind of reverberates a little bit. Yet, onward we go. And welcome to the human condition. And think of this like Jurassic Park, but it's all of our human, conditions put together. And hopefully one day the situation doesn't change and all the enclosures don't open up and come face to face with what we've been putting in our minds. And I made a new updated version of the Plato's Cave Titanic. I'll just go over really quick. So there's more than one iceberg, and the ship is driven by the burning circus tent and the AI entity like Plato's Cave. And the cave wall is the smartphone. And if you start journeying off the ship, there's a big old bucket of crabs ready to pull you back down, unless you're really dedicated to the truth and cause. And out on the ocean, there's the meme lord or the truther in the cardboard box, those that want to leave society. And there's the option for the self-sufficient community or the evil submarine and the sharks as well. And it's all put together, and how just one iceberg at a time is just getting weirder and more chaotic, and what we choose to do about all this. And I won't go into this too far, but this meme's about the idea of mewing is like the thing from Zoolander, which is a lot like the Force powers from the Jedi in Star Wars. And I kind of put all those together. And just a quick note that every time I talk about the analytics of my channel, they just get weirder and seemingly more artificial. And the same thing's been happening. And it seems like in a phase, they'll go from like a month or two. So I just wanted to put right here that not only will it break 130, that it'll go above and beyond, hopefully, to people that this message will reverberate to. And I don't know, get something from this. And this might seem weird, but I talked about a lot in the last presentation if you want to go back and get more about it. And how I found it's even in the Matrix right here about making this funny face, but how it kind of breaks reality. And it also changes people's faces. And that's why a lot of people do it, because it builds facial structure and your jawline as well. Just a meme here about facing the reality of life, and how I want everyone to come together, and how I'm looking for the people that really care about these subjects and want to move past them and not just let them keep happening to them passively because we're all stuck in someone else's story. And like Neo from the Matrix, you can wake up from that and build a better world. And our version of it just has so many memes. I want to talk about leadership here, because I'm not really seeking leadership with this. I have an idea for this community, but I don't really want to be the person that has to do everything. I kind of want to make it like we write down what we're going to do, and then we do that. And then we refer back to it in as moral way we can with human beings, because, a lot of us want to be something, but we have our own baggage and flaws with it. And some very things happen with leadership that you can see in our day-to-day lives. So I don't want to be too with that idea, especially if I criticize people. And just the vibration of life, that how this is reverberating, yet I don't see that many people talking about this. So I kind of want to add my own view of it and kind of end it with a better message. And just asking you, why are you here? It's kind of hard for me to gauge that. I know that seems self-explanatory. I've had a few people answer that. But just the feeling that I feel like we need to go deeper. We need to go farther. And I'll be referring to this meme a lot, because these are from some of the most synchronistic fantasy universes that I've ever read or been a part of. And as we go further into this presentation, learn that perhaps these things have a... Yeah, anyway, I'll go further into that. But the idea of going into the problem itself, the heart of the matter, that all these drop pods right here from these fictional universes are supposed to deliver the moral good guys to the heart of darkness and save the day and restore the balance to something better when one gets out of control or the other. And it seems like in our day-to-day lives, a lot of things are going out of control, and that can cause a lot of fear and anxiety in ourselves because we don't really naturally vibrate with that chaos. And one of the largest ideas and focuses of this channel is finding that eye of the storm and that peace in all this chaos, so we can further work on ourselves and, you know, not make it as bad as it has to be. And kind of back to the leadership idea, recently Tucker Carlson is one of the people that's been kind of promoted by the mainstream media as like the good guy, that he's like talking about evil. And he made these Christmas shirts I saw talking about not being a federal agent and trying to subvert people, and how it's related to a psyop and Christmas and all this that they're pre-programming with us, and trying to say, well, we're not doing that. And one of the biggest tie-ins to this is the Krampus movie, and how Krampus tries to trap real people in these snow globe false realities, and kind of like in a hellish snow globe, so he can kind of feed off their torture. And just back to the leadership idea, where we're going with this, and less about who's in front, but the whole communicative effort. Because if you were going to do something like this, everybody has to be on board on the ship with a common goal to make it work. And this is a person that I talked about in the very first full episode I did, and a lot of what I talk about goes back to his models of reality. Yet the last few months I've been getting a lot of weird things and messages from him, and lately he's been making these AI videos, and this one's about him with Bob Ross, and about how this apocalyptic event is coming, and how he's going to lead people to the promised lands. And I'm not saying he isn't good, but it's just crazy to me how all these people are trying to say, like, hey, I'm the good guy. Isn't it crazy with all this evil going on? Like, hey, we need to come together. Which, you know, I'm advocating as well, yet I know that might not be the game plan. It's just, I don't know, it's so chaotic right now, it's hard to tell. And just right here, talking about that in a lot of the movies on the left right here, these were all villains, but they all don't really look like villains. And how on the flip side of that, a lot of the people in TV shows like Breaking Bad that was really popular in our society was actually about a person turning evil. But a lot of people saw him as the hero and identified with him. And there's this quote from Steve Irwin that crocodiles are easy. They try to kill you and eat you. People are complicated, and they'll tell you lies and that they're not actually evil. They'll all try to say they're the good guy. And I'm not trying to say here who is good and bad. Just, I look at both sides of the coin, and if there's a whole bunch of other people trying to say that they're not evil right now, and you're kind of joining that club and promoting all that, because so far I haven't really promoted much of a community idea on this channel. I'd like to move towards it, yet I don't say like, hey, this is the best place ever, and there's no negativity here ever. Because then there'd be nothing to fix, and it seems like this place is a cautionary tale on what to fix, and learning not to follow the wolf in sheep's clothing that keeps reappearing, because it wants to trap you in a false reality like Krampus does. And kind of like the Pied Piper, lead you down this path, especially with technology, so that you become attached to this place. And I just kind of want to make a special part right here that the lowest level of Dante's Inferno was for treachery. That the betrayers of special relationships like Judas and Satan. And kind of this idea that, especially if you're a person that's trying to say like, hey, I'm a spiritual guy and I'll lead you through the apocalypse towards the promised land, and you're not doing that, I mean, there's not many things, in my opinion, that are worse than that. And here, just a second. We're having technical difficulties, everybody. This is what you get for buying a cheap microphone stand. But it works. So we're going to do this and keep going with it. Because even in the Bible, there's a lot of warnings about false teachers and being careful who you listen to. Because even the Bible itself says, like, don't even go to a church sometimes. Like, you just need two people, because, like, that's how many lies there are going to be in the world. And not being a sheep. And this meme of, I wish this presentation wasn't reverberating so much in my reality and seemingly to becoming true. And a lot of me wishes I was wrong about a lot of this stuff and could kind of lead a more ordinary, simple life. Yet, it seems this is where it's going, and this is the path we're on. And our journey to envision a better future that we can build together through all this chaos, because it makes one of the most amazing stories ever, a lot like Lord of the Rings. If they never left the Shire, it wouldn't have been nearly as good of a entertaining spectacle that a whole bunch of people enjoy and put in their subconscious. Because a lot of this comes down to the observer effect and entertainment, and like the Babylonian Titanic of what we're looking at. And I'm making this to a black screen, and other people are probably watching this on a black screen somewhere else. Yet we're all in this together, and we're also in social meat suits right now. So that's a part of it as well, that we can be alone, yet so much of this is about accepting one another for the better parts of ourselves and how we can support each other becoming even better human beings in a way that isn't toxic and destructive. And I didn't put this slide very many places in this presentation, but I'll probably refer back to this idea many times of like the Amish community and many hands make light work. That if you just had one of these guys and you were expecting him to build that entire barn just by himself and learn that lifestyle, and that hopefully you can just flock to that one day and you don't have to help build it like him, then this isn't what this is about. This is about relearning what we've forgotten, and that we have to rebuild everything. That if you were on the Babylonian Titanic and you wanted to build that self-sufficient society like that solar-paneled yacht on the left right there, that you have to reimagine everything in society and how you're going to recreate it and reproduce it in these horrible circumstances, a lot like the rich people are doing right now. And how we're going to do that in a moral way, if that's something you're interested in. And once again, welcome to the human condition. We're going to be seeing this slide a lot because boy does it reverberate home, and just the whole Jurassic Park idea that, all these ideas were locked up, but now they're starting to flood into our reality. And like the guy in the bottom right-hand corner, you might not be that excited about it as you're trying to go about your day-to-day life, and your bubbles kind of popped, which is the whole idea and what this presentation will be named after. And talking about the monkey on the back and the elephant in the room, that this seems like a huge cautionary tale and a huge test that we can learn from spiritually. And we're going to go a little deep in the weeds with this one and a little personal, but I don't think I'm the only one that have done any of these things. So, and we'll go into that in a minute. This is a Spider-Man meme, and Spider-Man's a very multi-interdimensional character. Like, he's one of the main ones in how it relates to the spider's web and the multiverse. And he says, "Spider-Man, have you ever watched Japanese adult entertainment?" And this isn't a kid's show, by the way. I don't mark it as, but FYI. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but here's a meme of Kim Jong-un, because there's this one like, I've seen enough adult entertainment, or I've seen enough movies or narrative structures to know where this plot of this device is going. And I've talked about this many times, that there's this channel that makes these parodies of these super soldiers in the future that are up against these shape-shifting furry entities that want to kind of take everyone over in like a hive mind, like this hive mind tentacle monster. And, the morality of humanity is trying to fight back against it. And this whole journey, and why I made this presentation and why I'm questioning all this and kind of woke up, was the Joe Rogan 9/11 podcast, and how that has to relate to Sirius, and how this was one of the biggest pre-programming events, especially at the time, because I watched this live, that you could have had at the time, and just the implications and how a lot of what they talked about there is coming true, and how we're going to keep coming back to that. Like, I had so many 9/11 synchronicities about this over and over and over again. So it's just like, there's a lot going on, and I'll go way deeper into that. And just like I was saying, going deeper into matter, like this idea is visualized in sci-fi universes is physically dropping like a pod of people into matter where they need the help at the most. Yet we can think of this as spiritual as well. And I'm from the state where it's illegal to have relationships with horses, because a guy did not survive from that. And I've never really done too much deep diving on it, yet it's always kind of been a colloquial meme or joke within our, within the state. Yet the idea that was a part of a bigger community, and he just didn't do that one time, that had been an ongoing thing, and that many people were doing that, and that was just something that came to light to the public. And we'll go back to this idea also of the roles being reversed, because you think of us as the one leading the horse, but what if you reverse it? And how this is prevalent in a lot of our armed forces, our intelligence agencies, in the cyber realm, especially, that I've seen in my life. And how it's also being reverberated with the youth, because a lot of them are watching these channels of people that they put this over. Like, imagine if I looked like one of those characters right there on the screen right now, and they use advanced software and cameras so they can look like those characters would be following my movement and what my finger's doing right now, so that in a very rudimentary way it would look like one of those characters had my voice. And they're doing this more and more, not identifying as their actual self, but as something else entirely. And usually it has to do with demons, animal hybrids, and aliens and what have you. And as these things become more prevalent, that even if they weren't a part of the human condition, that if it's like Jurassic Park and they come out of the pens, then they become part of the human condition, because you have to deal with it in your day-to-day life, whether you really like it or not. And I want to talk about this movie Dagon again, because it's influenced by H.P. Lovecraft and The Mouth of Innsmouth, about this guy that's on a sailboat ride with his girlfriend, and they crash there, and he finds out a town of these horrible mutated people that are basically becoming mutated from an elder god in the ocean, the tentacle monster that will be coming back to again and again and again. And I've also talked about how my father's name is Peter, and his biggest hobby in life that he does almost every week, and his career and professions all had to do with fish. So it's just so, because that's what reality is to me. Like this meme right here, like how blatant it is. It's like, hey, you'll have a father named Peter who is a fisherman, who works as a fisherman, and you have like fish statues all over the house. It's just like, what? And I think about these like UFOs, that this metal craft comes in and they are going into another dimension and using sonar and advanced technology so they can bring up beings and do what they want with them. In a lot of cases, that's eating them because they're tasty and they see them as lower life forms. And recently he caught some squid, and it just reverberated with this whole tentacle monster idea that's kind of been about and in my life, and just how we're conditioned to eat this stuff because, the idea of you are what you eat. And I've been talking a lot about, the dreams of whales and how that's connected to reality, but how whales, especially the sperm whale, that you can connect with the generative force of reality that dives into the abyss or the deep, like those drop pods I keep talking about, and fights these tentacle monsters. And there's evidence that based upon the amount of whale beaks in these stomachs that they do this a lot more than we thought they do. And back to the Dagon movie, that the relationship with this deep tentacle monster begins to mutate them, and they're trying to subvert the main character into joining their cult because they need real people. And it made me think of Rosemary's Baby. And there's someone in my family that says, like, this is their favorite movie ever. So it's just, building upon the fun. And, the idea of being surrounded by this society. And this is a movie I've covered before, that they're shape-shifting, and they have this scene where he's like, look, I'm a butthead, and he turns into a butthead. And the way they do these shape-shifting rituals is by consuming innocent people and taking their life force. And it's the same idea with Dagon, that they're taking real people from the outside and using it to feel these weird rituals so that they can live longer and serve this elder being, because, it doesn't want to wake up and come out of the deep. I mean, if you could have someone bring you breakfast in bed every day and you don't really have to get up, I mean, would you? Especially if you had a bunch of gold. So I love this meme from Transformers. This guy's being interrogated, and he's like, I was just sitting at home watching cartoons. Hey, I'm not going to jail for you or anybody else. Think of the human condition and all this. It's like, I've done nothing bad my entire life. And I've done stuff, but compared to what we're about to see unveiled, I think mine are, and I'm not trying to tout myself up, but I'm just saying, like, yeah, I've looked at adult entertainment a bit too much and had a few hookups, and I'm trying not to lie anymore and all this stuff, but I mean, compared to like what I was just talking about with this cult, like trying to subvert people, or like spiritual leaders trying to lead people off a cliff, like sheep's and wolf clothing. Like, and once again, I'm not trying to say I'm great, but he's saying here, you're like, who hasn't? Like, this is the human condition that they're trying to change and force upon us. Yet so many of us don't want to actually talk about this. And there's this meme right here lately of our society called the Gooner. I wish I looked less like him. But, like I said, another level, the joke of reality, but of someone who's kind of obsessed with it. But I kind of wanted to talk about that, not just to, complain about my problems, but that the idea of a Gooner, that back in the old days, that was like a mafia person that was like a bad guy. It was like, okay, boss, we'll do it. That wore the Italian leather and, stuff like that. And especially a few years ago, there was this huge meme called Never Goon, never look at adult entertainment because it takes away your life force. And they used the minions from Despicable Me that kind of follow the main character and do whatever he wants as like the builders of reality. And I kind of want to tie that back to Dragon Ball Z, that these, balls that relate to the Kundalini experience can basically give you superpowers or wish-granting powers over reality. And that's what, in my opinion, what the Whore of Babylon's after. The ascended individual, that they can steal that power and manifestation power and use it for themselves. And back to the idea of the ball, I keep saying this over and over, but it's just amazing how it keeps reverberating in my life, that this seems to be like an underdog story on steroids. And if you've ever seen this movie, the beginning of it, the main character is not in a very good spot. Yet that's what makes this movie so amazing, that the guy on the bottom goes to the top, and the guy that was on the top and being evil goes back to the bottom. And it switched. It just took a while, a lot longer than anyone wanted, and there were multiple times where you didn't think it was going to happen because, the odds against them were just so crazy. And this right here, when you least expect it, is when the person you always dreamt of finally shows up. And that seems to be a big part of our reality. And this quote I almost think of every day. One often meets his destiny on the road he takes to avoid it. And there are no accidents. And Kung Fu Panda, I've talked about before, has huge similarities to, like the Kundalini rising And just this whole idea of the hero's journey. And I'll be going back to this meme right here because this is where Truman holds the light of Sirius. But Sirius is related to dogs. It's related to Saturn. It's related to being trapped in the Matrix. It's related to interdimensional clown demons. And all of that and more. And how that just keeps reverberating in our reality. And at the very end of this presentation, I'll talk about this one right here. And I think I'm going to do this whole thing in one go, but an FYI, I might put a really small pause. And I'm not very good at video editing, so I'll probably just mute the microphone just so I can deal with this just for like literally a minute. This is kind of like an early birthing pain of this channel. But a sandbox idea from a video game is that they put all these different items and characters, and they kind of just let you go at it the way you want to go at it. Yeah, it has a main narrative and plot structure, but it's built to go at it from many different directions. And this was a person that QA'd games, and he was saying that I'm going to show you the worst possible consequences of your game design. And we are going to relate this idea back to like if you got to design reality or change the Matrix, and how this person's job it is to find, okay, what are the ways this could go wrong? And that he's just taking all this to the logical extreme, which is where I think we're going right now, is the logical extreme of all these technologies and realities and what we're putting into our subconscious. And the idea of developers, like they want to make a teapot, right? And they think it's obvious how you use it. And just like with the human condition, it's not always that simple, and it doesn't always happen that way. But, you know, sometimes it works out anyway, if you can deal with the goofiness. And a QA tester is there to meet standards and make sure that it functions properly so that the Matrix isn't glitching out and it's not too annoying. So we're going to go back to Tim Dillon here because I see him as one of the main pre-programmers now. And I think that's one of the reasons he wears his glasses now is because I've been watching his earlier ones from a few years back, and he didn't have to wear sunglasses. And I think that's because he used to say like, oh, this is all comedy. This is all entertainment, folks. He doesn't really say that anymore. And he also says, like, you don't even need to make comedy of it because it's just so absurd now. You can just if you're just willing to basically say it, that it's basically comedy, and it's so dark in a way that you kind of have to laugh. And it's also so fourth wall breaking in a way, and it just keeps on being that way, that while I'm listening to it for entertainment, I'm just taking these clips out and using it for my presentation because it's just... And he's saying right here, and get yourself on camera because people are waiting to hear from you. And that's the whole thing, that you don't realize that people are waiting for you and what you want to say. And that what we're going down is one of the craziest ways to run society. Like, we're going full on crazy in chaos. And robots will be child abusers. He's saying here it's like 100%. And he's saying we'll make it president. Craziest thing I heard in my life. Let's keep going. But here's the reality. We don't give a crap about any of it because the ship's being driven by tech people that don't really care about the average person. And to give birth to this thing before anyone notices to a demon, and we're likely to do it quickly and quietly. And the birth of a demon so it can quietly eat all life on Earth. And we don't want to be questioned. We can't have fat people from Texas stop the birth of this demon. Chinese quietly giving birth to this AI demon so that we can pledge our loyalty to it and it can run our lives. That's kind of what it is, by the way. It's literally what's happening. And they say that probably kind of use the word... They're basically giving them the benefit of the doubt, but it's just so crazy. These, by the way, these aren't perfect subtitles, so I kind of have to put these back together because it's been like a month since I've heard these. It's artificial life created and vested with an insane amount of power. And it's just crazy. Lately, there's been all these news stories about how much power and data and even physical resources and even water that all these data farms that are stealing our data right now or logging our data, that they're going to plug right back into this artificial being so that it can know all of our thoughts and dreams and behaviors and patterns. And I was watching this movie lately. I forget what it's called, but it's a very recent one, and the whole town is having problems from this data center that's taking all their natural resources, but they can't really do anything about it because it's pretty much above the law. And right here he's reading a story about the Titanic and the Federal Reserve, but I kind of wanted to relate it back to the standard of living and what I keep talking about, and how this AI entity that's in the very heart of all of this has to do with it. And he's even looking at memes right here above Spider-Man. And the Spider-Man thing is saying that, hey, there's too much lead in the water. His grandfather was subjected to asbestos, and he's full of microplastics. Like, all this polluting of the environment that was done intentionally by people that knew it was bad because they didn't care about us. And there's pretty much a guy that's seen as a truther in this movie, and it's interesting that he has this picture of a kundalini snake on the right, and he even has like the owl right there. So they're relating, taking back your mind, especially in relation to these data centers, to the kundalini journey. And all these people just want it here. It's kind of already here, and some want it here more than others. China will get it. So I don't know if there's any alternative, and certainly even if there is, no one's entertaining it, and I have no power here sitting at my desk. It's always funny. You never know the implications of seemingly making a video for right now, a few dozen people, and what it might become one day. And he's saying, what's coming is coming. And he says it a lot, and what's coming is an AI demon that is going to be birthed by this administration. And this is back to one of those universes I was talking about earlier, those drop pods, where people can be possessed by demons, but not only that, they can aspire to try to be demons themselves and gain immortality if they act out the wishes of these chaos gods in another dimension and cause more like pain and death and harm. This is a meme from like the Blade Runner 2049 universe of like the traumatized main character just kind of like watching this all unfold, just like the average kind of person that wasn't really expecting like literal demons to be manifesting. And I was watching another one really recently that he's talking about 9/11 as he has a dog on the table, and it's just crazy that how even this is relating back to like Sirius and 9/11 and all of that. And, back to that Truman Show meme, because it just all is put together, that when I see these now, I think of it all put together and not just a single piece. And I found this one right here. This guy made this AI song of Peter Pubes talking about the Pennywise clown from It and how killing kids is wrong. This is a message for anyone that needs to hear this. So I saw this other one recently that he was talking about the temple that was allegedly for abusing kids on St. James Island. But he's talking about the tunnels underneath it and why were they using these tunnels and what was it connected to. And I just want to say, where I live and the college all my family went to has publicly miles of steam tunnels. And I've heard from people that 7 miles is enough that it can connect to the Capitol building, which I've heard people say it does. And, they have their own secret societies there, so it's very interesting. And how the capital of the state I live in is named after Olympia, or Olympus, where, the mortal realm meets the realm of the gods, this in-between point. And I don't have a slide of it here, but there's even like signs downtown that like what they named the bridge after is like a gateway between the past and the future. There's a lot of stuff like that and how that's all related. And I've talked about like in Wrath of the Gods that these gods are all talking here how they're going to manipulate humanity to keep focusing on them so they can have their attention or energy so they can keep living forever, because if they're forgotten about, then they fade away. And I've talked about the sequel to The Shining, Dr. Sleep, many times, and how these vampiric entities traumatize you and then suck out your life force, and it looks like steam. And that's how they keep themselves living. And how the main character in the very beginning was just kind of bouncing around in life until someone gave him a chance and kind of a place to, not be lost anymore, to get it, a place where you can take a breath, because it just seems like lately that's so hard. And in the movie Snowpiercer, that after he goes through the struggle to try to balance the divide between the poor and the rich on the self-sustaining train in the apocalypse, the main evil guy is here in the forever engine with the main character, and he's trying to say, like, hey, I want you to be the new conductor of this forever engine that runs off kids. And, like, you can have your steak when, like, no one else on the train really gets steak except for really rare occasions. Like, you can be the new king of this place. And this movie declines his offer and resets it back into the natural way. And he says, back to the underground tunnels. And he's talking about people that have, gotten off the island and are talking about it. And it's hard to judge whether or not it's true or not, but like everything else in this presentation, you have to be the judge. And he talks about elevators that went inside the hilltop. And we're going to come back to this idea probably in a long ways, talking about another movie, but this has been shown many times. And it's about evil. And about how evil hung over the island itself. And there seemed to be something very disturbing about it, because it seemed to be very intentionally designed for a purpose and have deep meaning behind it. And now he's saying it's a gateway to another dimension. And he has this flash to this random show, and they're talking about how the Sphinx was a door to another dimension, a gateway to immeasurable power, and that to another dimension, and demons live in the box. And we'll really get back to that in the idea of Saturn. And talking about gateway between our world and the other world was considered thinner the higher you were, physically and mentally. And over, if it didn't work, things of old, also things of new. And if they did it in ancient times, they're doing it today. Really does matter, because North in occult theology, it represents the occult. It represents the void, the abyss, the dwelling place of demonic temples that were dedicated to Moloch, the demon who demanded child sacrifice. And he's talking about sacred geometry and, the tree of life. And we're going to go back to this idea of 22, because that's been popping up in my life, especially since I watched the second Lego movie, the second Lego movie, part 2, that has a special part of 22 in it. And, I saw those very closely to each other and resonating with the spiritual force behind it. And also, the Kundalini, because, you have a green reptilian being right there. And I kind of want to talk back about the Half-Life universe. And that whole story is about us being invaded through a gateway we make to try to get infinite energy. And they call it the resonance cascade. So it's this vibrational change that brings us upon it. And in their lore, they have a multiverse. And that they were trying to break into those dimensions so they can basically monetize it or, get new land, because they're greedy. And when that happens, humanity's combined into this alien hive mind, and, they're combined with technology, and it's just really not a good time for the average human. And right here, they're talking about the main character, how at the end of these games, he's basically imprisoned in a false reality, so he can't keep meddling with their plans. Like, they trap him in a time loop somewhere else, so he can't keep saving the day, because he keeps saving the day, and that's annoying. So there's this meme or song it was from about being a real human being, but he had this original life where he's a scientist at this company, and he gets to live his day-to-day life, yet that breaks. And when it breaks, you don't get to go back to this. That you have to deal with, that's your new reality now, of like zombies and aliens and wearing a super suit and having most of the people you know about not be around anymore because they weren't ready for that. And they say right here, they're talking about you. And this is that dimension they'll trap him in until they need him again for their narrative structure. But they're saying you're still the same, even throughout all this chaos. And I want to peek back at our reality in a world that they've been waiting for a sequel for this game for about 20 plus years now. And they've been really teasing the community lately. And this is one of the memes from it about injecting hope into it, and he's kind of like doing a Jesus pose right there, into the franchise. Yet they're being trolled. They're being taken for a ride because, like, even in the award show that they had a few days ago, like, they teased it multiple ways. But once again, they were bamboozled, and it was not announced. And there's this meme, like, nothing ever happens, and, relating it to the clown again. And there's this meme right here of nothing ever happens. But, I think one day, these things are happening. It's just not on a scale that, people are acknowledging, really. Yet, it's just crazy watching these cycles of people trying to hope for it, but then people lose their hope, and then they get it back, and then they go insane, and, just related to the clown again. And, this is Interstellar, where the main character goes to the fourth dimension and sees through space and time, and he's kind of watching this meme of hope. And, just kind of the luck of the draw, and the idea of, like, this interdimensional being trying to trap you there. And I found this one right here that, like, they're trying to do, like, relate to this occultic ritual that they'll try to summon the game. And, hopefully that doesn't go wrong. And that it'll be related to the new Steam machine that they're releasing. And, it relates back to Steam that I was just talking about with Dr. Sleep. And how it's this black cube. And how earlier they were saying the demons live in the cube. And how this will be tied to that and, virtual reality. And here's some memes from the Hellraiser universe. We have such memes to show you. This cycle, I meet someone, we talk. I detail the eternity of torment I have planned for their weak, pitiful flesh. They solve my puzzle box, banishing me to hell again. Ah, yes, the cycle. I am here for mathematics, not pleasure. And, that's a very dark universe, and they want to turn our reality into that, and how that's related back to the Warhammer 40k universe that I keep talking about, that their faster and light travel is through these demonic realms of our conscious personified, or subconscious personified, and that we can make a gateway to those. And that's the idea of that movie I was just talking about, Event Horizon, and how that goes bad. And he's talking about all the cultures worldwide that have a history of human sacrificing, and it's a lot. And it's good to be served tea, yet what if you are the tea being served? I made this one a long time ago. I plucked some memes for my original presentation to put here. I really like this one. If you'd brought this up a few years ago, people would have called you paranoid and insane and crazy, but not anymore. And now they have no choice but to reckon with the fact to the serious people all over the world. Once again, back to 9/11. Epstein wrote at one point to Barack, quote, with civil unrest exploding, that they cannot simply transform it to a cash flow. So they're talking about, we'll have to make a digital ID. We'll have to take all the money out of your bank account. It will put you in jail. And if at any point of this you suggest that perhaps it's weird or negative or bad or harbinger of things to come, you'll be called every name in the book, or we'll start pushing your buttons. And there will be no logic to it. So I'm starting to think that the people, the architects of these policies, don't actually want it to work. They actually want the chaos. They want the strife. They want the problems. They want the economy to collapse. They want the violence so that they can come in and take everyone's rights. Clown comedy, or clown comedian who wears sunglasses and does a show in front of an inflatable cactus. So he's kind of like talking about himself right there. Or just, like live streamers in general and all that. And I kind of wanted to bring it back to the cactus idea, that I have this really weird synchronicity in my life with the Shactus. They Photoshop Shaq's face on a cactus, and it's related to 33, or, like the idea of ascension. And I've seen the cactus synchronicities in a lot of other places as well, but this is one of them. And someone somewhere came across this stuff and realizes what the hell is going on, but they don't seem to ever care. They seem to continue on this course because it guarantees more violence and chaos, at which point the violence and chaos starts to get overwhelming. And now he's talking about how they're stealing children and selling them to people in positions of power and saying, like, a divorce is kind of like small fish compared to that. And I found this meme of Eyes Wide Shut, but they put a dog with a gun aiming through it. Just how it relates Eyes Wide Shut back to this whole idea of serious and memes. And he's saying, nothing could prepare us for the final horror. Which, I'm kind of hoping to a little bit. And it's not a horror if you know about it and deal with it. And that I require from a friend that, first of all, you believe that society is on the verge of imminent collapse. That helps only because that there's less of a learning curve, that you're already kind of on the page. And that's part of this presentation is I'm not really holding people's hands. I'm kind of just diving right into it so that we have some time to deal with this and do good things. But it just means that you have the awareness that so many people, because their bubble of life is going good, they're trying to ignore what's happening, the storm outside, the waves rising, the icebergs popping everyone's bubbles. And he's saying that your square foot of life is fine, but down the street there are massive problems. And he's saying people have planned it for you so you don't have any independence. And I put the idea about food right here because that's one of the biggest ways they're going to do it is because people need food. And I found this video right here of this guy that went to Japan and tried their work culture and how he describes it as the corpse people because it just steals your soul and so many of them just become alcoholics. And when he was going there, he had this first class plane trip and he's saying he didn't feel like he fits in there, with the fanciness. And he's having this appetizer on a plane. He's all blown away that oh my gosh, on a plane, I'm having an appetizer. Just that standard of living and just taking that back to trying to capture a higher standard of living of ourselves. So it might be the apocalypse, but hey, we got awesome organic made appetizers that, you can name everyone involved in the growing and processing of that appetizer and the cooking of it. And you know them all and you see them all. And you're all trying to survive the craziness and the chaos so that you don't completely ignore it, but that you do have some breathing room from it. And it's not just, your bubble being popped and just full on contact all the time. And he's saying this country is run by demons. They're sucking the energy out of children. So this is where he's saying it years ago where he doesn't have his sunglasses on yet. And so even back then he was saying it, but he was saying it much more comedically. And he's saying you're going to want to be sober when it comes. You know what's coming. That's something I'm still working on. Think about the government, that is. It's a little silly. And people don't want to think it's a murder, it's a death cult. That, skins people and takes their vital fluids so they can get high. And he's saying, I wonder why, the mainstream hasn't given me a shot like Comedy Central for saying all this. I wonder why I'm not just exploding on YouTube right now. And he's talking about here in the 9/11 podcast going to the Pacific Northwest to where all the goth pale weirdos are and, hey-oh, and how that relates back to Nephilim clowns and how that relates back to the Truman Show, but just my life in general because I'm half ginger and, I'm really tall, so it relates all back to that and giants and, just everything and my life, and it's just so weird. And he's saying they're trying to put a chip in your head and, inject you with all this stuff. And he's saying now the prepper stuff's starting to feel pretty smart, huh? And he has this ad where he's saying, let an alien artificial intelligence design the entire website. He makes specifically saying it's alien. And I found this video very recently with that about this guy saying the YouTube algorithm's going down the worst path possible. It doesn't make any sense. The AI is judging your video, and he's saying I should just ask the AI YouTube to reach through the screen and just, interact with me that way. And that makes me think of the Ring movie, but, that is so sexualized as well. And it's interesting that I had a dream, or a friend in my childhood had a dream when he saw this movie. And he was being haunted by it. And I helped him actually stop having a nightmare about it and how to deal with it. And how to contain that evil and not be, subjected to that evil stalking you. And he's talking about how it'd be awesome if it was awesome. But how this is being abused and misused. And I'm going to kind of take a side tangent right here because I didn't really know where to put this. That this is a song I really like listening to. And it's called Monkey Eater. And it's kind of a mashup of everything. And it's a lot about the idea of the Chosen One and how that relates to like the Sun God or Dragon Ball Z that I was talking about earlier. Or Sun Wukong or the monkey, Sun God. And how I've talked about this movie earlier, Monkey Man on Netflix, about this guy that harnesses his inner beast and monkey so he can basically save the day in this clash between the rich and the poor and help people. And it's about spiritual ascension and gaining superpowers basically, and how it relates to Shiva and the god of death and how that's a part of the main character's journey. And I was talking about Monkey Man. There's people in this world that eat monkey soup. And they say when you kill a monkey, it sounds a lot like a human dying as well. So it's, it's going to be interesting when the shoe's on the other foot if the society does change. And once again, it's good to be served tea, yet what if you are the tea being served? And, back to the sun god idea, one of the biggest animated shows in the world right now that I have followed, and so synchronistic, is about this spirit through space and time that's called the spirit of liberation, that basically is kind of possessed the main character towards liberating the world government that's all corrupt in his universe. And last video I found this music video of it, and he died and his heart stopped beating, but then the spirit brought him back to life. And it was during nighttime. And these are all the dreams of everyone. This is a ceremony you do in Japan where you put your dream in one of those little paper lanterns and put it in the sky. And how the spirit can do things that no one else can do. And they say, you're our only savior since you destroyed our gods. Which is an interesting sentiment. While he's saying that, in the video, this guy's animating it where the spirit's like taking over this evil dragon Kundalini spirit and saving the day. And wait for your emperor to come back again. That spirit to come back and liberate the world from this tyranny. And he's not just a man, he's so much better. Yet looks like a man. And how also that when he goes on his journey, he saves all these people that would have had bad endings to their story, but then gives them redemption and a new purpose in life. And very recently in that series, basically the ultimate evil person that runs this evil world government in this fictional universe has this magic ritual and can not only like materialize things out of matter, but it can also possess you and turn you evil. It's called Dami Reversi, and means like the return to darkness, where you can take real people and turn them evil. So they're doing that to the giants, and behind the giants are all these nightmares that have come to life through these magical powers. And it's basically saying, they've been alluding to that the reason they haven't been able to fix the world is because this evil person's power, the only one that can stop it, is this other spirit throughout space and time that liberates everybody. So until the spirit's back, you can't really break the possession that these people are under, that this ultimate evil can do. And how that's happening in that universe, as it's darkest before the dawn, and how this spirit's returned and changing reality. And, there are two sides to every coin. But, hello, boys, I'm back. And, back to the music video right there, that this character right here is related to my channel name, or my channel, the picture of my channel, because he has this thing he does that's related to Azura, which is Eastern deity, and his willpower becomes personified. So like he imagines himself with more arms, like this deity, and having 3 heads, and like his enemies will see him do that, and he can do that for limited amounts of time. His imagination can come to life itself, and it's called Azura, the demonic 9-sword style technique that is a manifestation of his extreme willpower and fighting spirit, rather than, magical powers or, the gift of the gods. And, it has you can manifest what appears to be an illusion. But I also want to talk about Asuras in our mainstream society, because there was a struggle between them and the Devas, which were both supernatural beings and gods in Hindu mythology. And the mainstream is that the Devas are benevolent divine gods who uphold righteousness, while the Asuras are the more powerful, often malevolent counterparts driven by greed or a lust for power. But I'd argue, it flip-flops. And I found this one relating these two to, the serpent and this Kundalini journey. And, how I see that as a tool like anything else. You can use a pen to write a horror novel or a paradise. And I kind of see that as the same thing. And this is the picture of my channel right here after a game called Azura's Wrath, where these gods in the heavens are turning evil. So, he's evil to them, but they're evil to him, and they're preying upon everybody else. And this will be probably the last video I talk about in this series, the 13 series I'm making, as it all leads up to it. But kind of a sneak peek is his daughter's named Mithra. So his daughter's being sacrificed and held in this bubble to steal her superpowers, to fuel this matrix of pain and suffering by this creator being in the background. And he's waking up to all this fact that he's being trapped in a cyclical reincarnating matrix, and the divine care keeps being taken from him, unjustly, and how that karma comes back. And how in that show, like I was saying, that this willpower can come to life and affect reality, and is especially related to lightning right here. And that there are many kinds of it, and he's saying here there are infinite chances. And one of them is you can look into the future. So you can change reality based upon your willpower if your willpower is strong enough, and make people pass out because your willpower is so strong. It's affecting the pressure around you of reality. Kind of like a thunderstorm almost. And I kind of wanted to take a tangent here because this is a meme of Silent Hill 2. And I talked about this before, and it always relates to me because he's named James and I'm named James. And it's the whole game's about his imagination coming to life, and these monsters in the background right there are from his imagination itself. And kind of like the mind of God idea right here, that when he goes into this mist, that his imagination comes to life and he has to deal with it and try to get the best ending possible. And kind of this idea back to divine care I want to talk about is Spider-Man, because you have Mary Jane right here who's connected to him, and the multiversal idea. And I always think of Mary Jane as in marijuana, which is a huge one of my problems of mine. And I always kind of relate it because you have to burn it, right, to enjoy it. So you're kind of burning what's related to the divine care so that you feel better. And it's a short-term thing. So it's one of the things that makes me not want to do it so much in my life, and I can tone down on it like everything else in my life. But like a lot of things right now, life is complicated. And as it gets weird, because this video is called He Regrets Nothing, that he goes into this mist, all these demons, even though he's smoking. And like I said, this monster right here is part of his subconscious come to life. And here he's making the mewing face like I had the meme in the beginning of the video. And, he's willing to go into the excrement of reality with these monsters in this joking way. But at the end, he gets to drive away back to this reality and this better ending for himself. And that's what this whole channel is about, and about escaping this box we've been put in. And how that has to relate to memes and laughter and the positive moral clown in this world, and the clown that doesn't eat people, and how that's also related back to the Matrix and waking up from the dream you're in, and the observer effect. And I kind of want to put this meme right here that the lonely sunfish stopped eating and became sad during the aquarium's renovation due to the lack of visitors. So the staff placed cardboard cutouts of people by the tank, and it became happy again. And he says right here, I never even realized that the fish might look at all of us the same we stare at them the way we do in an aquarium. Interesting and happy they are there. So it's like this fractal observing effect. And the standards that you're in, because, that fish probably wouldn't want to be there if it could live in the wide ocean and be more free. And also, while we're on the topic of weird sea life, that octopus fascinate me because it relates back to that tentacle hive mind. And not that all octopus are evil, but just how smart they are. And that this guy has an octopus and how it remembers him day to day and gets mad when he doesn't show up and likes being put in this little tank so he can go around and say hi to all the other octopus in the room. And I mean, it's cool, but I just hate seeing octopus being stuck in the little boxes. And, you know, their one highlight is seeing people, so they become, like, Stockholm syndromed. So, and, you know, not that they wouldn't like them, but just not that there's much of a choice there, really. And I talk a lot about insects getting bigger, and I didn't put a lot of slides in it, but it's interesting because here's a natural beetle, and they made this, like, 3D printed little toy beetle that weighs 150 times what the natural beetle is, but it still flipped it. And the world may overlook you, but your strength will speak. And this guy was saying, I'm so glad we're a lot bigger than the beetle. But this idea is that the pressure, if our environment changes and the pressure of oxygen changes, like it used to be in our mainstream history, that insects will grow big again. And this movie, Eight-Legged Freaks from my childhood, it kind of relates the message of why that's not a good thing. Or like Sheila from Lord of the Rings. And also on top of this, lately AI videos, they've been hard to tell what's fake and what isn't, and people have been falling for them, especially like the low grainy security cam footage and things like that. And you used to be able to tell the difference between CGI and prosthetic effects, but that line is blurring. And just the quality of these are going up and up and up and up. And it's just crazy that it's doing that, because this one has to do with Burger King and McDonald's. But one of the hardest things to film is wartime stuff, because it's so complex and you have to get it exactly right for it to look right. This one was one of the best I've ever seen so far. And I want to really, this is the fast food, because, like, you know, if you are what you eat, this is probably pretty similar to how you would look. And, you know, Burger King would probably look a lot worse. And, you know, here's with Taco Bell, that this guy gets trapped in a burrito. This clown, too, gets trapped in a burrito. And, you know, this idea of, you know, you are what you eat, or, you know, the shoe might be on the other foot. And this guy's saying, goodbye, Hollywood. Artificial intelligence is getting better and better. And this is a guy that, you know, only has, like, not even 5,000 followers. So this is, like, a small video. This isn't even, like, anything big. And I found this other one of, like, this rich person party that has, like, all these literal demons that are there. And it's just very interesting as it becomes more lifelike. And this guy was, like, making fun that, like, oh, you can still tell, you know, especially these examples of, like, where his back's backwards. And, yeah, with the bad examples, but there are a lot of good examples where you can't. And this is one of the biggest streamers in the world that I've talked about before. And this video is of a guy goes into a casino, and he takes a picture of these two people playing a slot machine. And then he makes an AI video where one of the guys in the slot machine, like, kisses the back of the neck of the other guy playing the slot machine, which never actually happened. But then he goes and shows it to them, and they're, like, all confused. And this comment, this is not even the beginning. This is just the warm-up. And here's another one where this guy made one of this customer licking the mannequins and sniffing them, and he showed it to a manager. And the manager's like, quit sniffing the mannequins. And the guy's like, I didn't sniff the mannequins. And this guy's saying, this isn't funny. Accusing someone of a crime they didn't commit with faked AI evidence isn't a prank. It's defamation, and it's against the law. And imagine the whole video itself was AI too, and we got tricked into thinking this was a real interaction and saying this is too dangerous, and how this is going to restructure our society itself. And just how I've been seeing more and more and more that what seem to be real videos, like this guy just catching a fish, and people are saying, like, no, this is AI. Like, it's not every video, of course, but it's just more and more videos lately I've been saying that people are just randomly going, like, oh, you know, it's not even the main point of the video. It's just like a guy fishing, but some guy will come in and be like, hey, you're AI. And just how it's getting hard to tell, and how you tell. And this meme, I can't go the rest of my life asking if it's AI or not. And this channel right here I like tuning into every once in a while, because it talks about the patents that are, you know, very new and forthcoming. And robots with quantum hive minds, what could go wrong? And huge breakthrough in mind reading tech, panic accordingly. And how that relates to brain chips and being scanned, and how that goes together, and where this is all going. And just lately, it's been really impacting me that 10 years ago, a lot of people were saying that this would be further out, towards like 2040, but that 2030 is getting close. And they're saying we're going to have AGI, which is the same functions as your brain. So it's like learning new things, like you can learn new things, and you can't tell the difference between AI and it, or like a real person in it. Like if you couldn't see them, they're fooling you into thinking they're a real person. And they can learn things now that they aren't programmed to learn, and they, have all these data centers jacked into them. And how that's moving towards the singularity, but they used to say, oh, it's 2045, but now they're moving it forward, and it's just, whoa. And lately, this has been one of the big things that RAM has been, basically they create an artificial situation where they're going to be giving all their good RAM to AI, and they're purposely making the market crap, so the price is just skyrocketed, so the average consumer is just paying way more than they used to. And this was completely planned for by the rich people who aren't facing any real repercussions. And I want to talk about, because I've talked about the RAM bites the apple, and how that relates to our reality, and how occultic that is, and how RAM is random access memory. And you can also think of that as like chaotic. It's random, it's chaotic, and it's being harnessed, and how that's related to like Baphomet, this goat entity that wants to take over reality, and how that's related to the Knights Templar. And we'll get back to that later. So this is right here a music video online, and they have some very symbolic videos I've watched, and this one's about how like your sins are personified as a wolf. And he's saying right here, I'm out of my head, of my heart, and my mind. So the balance between all of these, and like, what if imagination came to life? And that's a part of one of these videos right here, that these kids are walking home, but to the music video, like their imagination's coming to life. Like this in the real world might seem like a little robot, but to them, it's this big, huge adventure. And they're saying, what's the meaning when you have a broken home? And, the meaning is you're not alone. And there's another one right here called Summer Nights, which has a lot of weird stuff in it. So basically these kids go to this abandoned like government research facility, because it totally doesn't seem like a school. And they go in and they start putting on these masks and doing this ritual where they have her sit on a frog, and this girl with a cat shirt uses this wand so that she'll remember her past. And the lyrics are, I tried to warn him that sometimes we fall in the dark. And not only that, she has like the little death earrings right there, the goth cat girl. So, we're back to that idea. And just the movie I talked before, Weapons, that came out recently about this witch lady that uses a wand to hypnotize and mind control all the kids to turn them into her slaves, that she also uses as a weapon. So, this mind control, and how even mainstream have related that to MK Ultra and clowns and, harvesting people's vital organs and things like that. And just kind of as a little tangent, that this is one of the memes of our reality right now, that people are giving out alcohol and machetes to homeless people, just rising that chaos. And after they do the wand, it says heading to a party, and you can see that star right there, so she can remember. She has her star power back, and they're all kind of innocent and kids again. And it says, I never meant to cause no harm, never hurt nobody. Because, they're having a blast right now, but, what if that was kind of like the Weapons movie right here, where it was at the expense of other people's consciousness. And they go out of the research facility, and they have like this island, this paradise island that they can go to. And it was kind of like their breathing room, and how they have like Sailor Moon, which is about time traveling spirits giving you superpowers for the fight between good and evil, and Link, the multi-dimensional versions of the main character's hero's journey and quest to save the Divine Feminine, and Power Rangers, which have all the multiverse stuff as well, and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, which came to life in the Ghostbusters movie. And you have a plane right here, visualizing ascension. You have the frog magic right there. They're talking about a chance to fly. And once again, the Power Rangers and the Megazords are the giant robots. And, I'll kind of allude to it later, how, planes I was talking about, and ascending and flying and making your willpower become manifest, that one of the main people in our reality doing that is the Musk. And that he's the guy that is related himself to the game Diablo and the demon Lilith and being her champion, and he was the best player of that game ever, which was a total lie. And how that's related to human hybrids and alien technology and these rockets. And here it said pure soy, and that's a meme in our reality of like being a soy is like being a consumer. Like, you don't have a backbone, that you just do what people tell you, and you make these crazy faces about it because you're happy. And the duality about between this mindless consumer and being this, independent guy that's like mewing and following his own journey. And how that guy wants to literally put his will inside your brain, or this AI entity. And here was a recent one where who do you look up to the most? And he says the creator. And what's your position on God? And he says God is the creator. I believe this universe came from something, but what is the God he's talking about? Is it this one right here? We'll find out. And back to the Power Rangers here in the Megazord, and the giant robots, and how that has to relate to the multiverse and the mind of God and Power Rangers, and how at the end of time they all the different variants come together. And the same with the robots as well. And how I've talked about this anime from Japan that, this robot's the size of the universe, but it has a robot inside of its head that has a robot inside of its head that has people inside of that robot. And, it just keeps going up and down. And I found this one right here about bringing an SD card back from the dead. It almost kind of looks like a ritual here, right? And he has all these recovery tools, and it's called the spider board. So, once again, we're back to this idea of the spider. And I often forget that we are aliens with the alien technology. And, how if you look down really far and talking about the random access memory again, and reclaiming this data back using, this ritual that looks like little Solomonic sigils and electricity and spiders, and how these are going to start creating reality with AI. And here's the guy talking about the most expensive AI chip in the world. And someone saying, one of the top comments, alien technology from Area 51 finally coming to light, it seems. And also relating it to the creator of the Terminator chip, and relating it to Cyberdyne Systems and Skynet. He invented the microprocessor that led to the creation of Skynet, an artificial intelligence that becomes self-aware and launches a war against humanity. Dyson based his work on reverse engineering the damaged CPU of the first T-8000 Terminator, which was sent back in the time from the future. Which is interesting because I'm going to talk about the Call of Duty zombie game again, which I've talked about, and how they get this advanced technology from the future that has to do with giant robots that allows them to get infinite energy, but this opens up a portal to space and time. And this all started with the Knights Templar and how they're relating it to Easter eggs, and we'll go back to that idea later. And all these rituals that summon these tentacle monsters from their dimension that want to eat everything. And how these same characters are throughout space and time. And they all kind of meet together to try to stop and seal up, Pandora's box once and for all. Moving on. And how they'll find fresh realities and then open up this blue plasma portal and let these tentacle monsters in. And how these tentacle monsters look exactly like the ones from Stranger Things. So they're just pre-programming this idea over and over again. And how this blue plasma portal relates to Loki and the mind of God and infinite energy, and how that relates to the CERN portal. And that's used to bring these interdimensional monsters from the abyss to our realm. And so we're going to go to the Lego movie after this, but I need to take a quick break real quick, so just stay with me. This will actually be really quick. All right. Sorry about that wait, ladies and gentlemen. I'm back. So we're about over 300 slides into this. So that's where I was originally thinking of ending this video, but I kind of want to just keep going with that. And like I said, apologies for the pause there. So we'll get back into this. I hope in the future to get more into editing, but I'm not sure if I'll have the video editing software before this. My guess is no, but thanks for tuning in through that. Now that I'm letting you... So, the beginning of the Lego movie starts with a door that becomes blue plasma, a lot like we were just talking about. And is a flashback that Will Ferrell, this manager of reality, says, now I'm letting you come down here and play. Your sister gets to as well. And all these alien UFOs come out of this plasma door. And they have this inverted pentagram as their logo. And they have all this plasma coming down. And they come here. We are here to destroy you. We are from the planet Duplo. And the main character is like, wait, guys, there's no need to fight anymore. See, friends. And he tries to offer them love. And they eat the heart. And then they send up the little Lego bits in a plasma stream to the mothership so they can take the material for themselves. And, this just reminds me of Independence Day. The character in that faces the evil. Hello, boys, I'm back. The person you'd least expect to show up and save the day. And they're saying, more, we need more matter. So the main female character builds this big hammer and tries to hit him, but it doesn't really work. And she's named Lucy. And he says not to worry. And they kept coming after whatever was bright and shiny. And they were always accompanied by this catchy pop music as well, this different vibration. So they got a league of all the bravest heroes together, and they went to the doorway to the other dimension. And they're not sure what happened to them, if they got lost or the aliens got them or what happened to them in the dreaded Stairgate or Stargate. And that's the same thing that they keep pre-programming us at CERN, or this infinite energy that's related to the Tesseract and the, Stargate movies and show, and how that's related to South Park's Imagination Land, because in Area 51 they had a Stargate that was connected to this universe that could interact with the subconscious. And in the subconscious, everything there was real. Everything we watch is real somewhere else in some way. I mean, we might cartoonize it a little bit, but that's the idea being presented anyway. And one of the first things that the Orange Cheeto Man did when he became the president was the Stargate project, and to build the world's largest AI entity. And one of the people there is Oracle, so it's directly related to Lord of the Rings. And I found this famous meme of him where he's with all these rich people, and they're touching this glowing orb that looks like it's from Lord of the Rings, and they have Saruman right there. And Saruman was the man servant of Sauron. The hint, wink, wink there. That they need this human servant to carry out their will. And back to Lego, that their future became post-apocalyptic, like Mad Max, this desert world. And they abandoned all this innocence and youth and called it Apocalypseburg. And it has the Statue of Liberty, like the Rise of the Planet of the Apes. They have a phase shift and things are different, and their day-to-day life is a lot different. And he says it's a heckish place to live. And, their standard of living went down, which is the whole reason I made this meme and I made this channel, and why I'm talking to this black box right there and trying to see who agrees and see where this goes. And the main character, who is seemingly unfazed with his own vibration music, says, I wake up in the morning and we're living out a dream, or in a dream. And right here, this dolphin that says 515, and it's kind of funny, after I saw this movie, I saw a bunch of 515, synchronicities in my life that were oddly auspicious. And it's the foretelling of the apocalypse, and how he has this dream that it leads to Armageddon, and how they're all sucked up into this void and disappear. And that's kind of his nightmare, and that's the whole point of the never-ending story, is that everything gets sucked up into the nothing, and the main story has to bring the generative force back and give divine care a name again, and it resets reality back to the way it was. So he builds a spaceship out of his house, and he goes off to save the day. Basically in the multiverse, or the Stargate. And where his friends went earlier, this is basically the main villain that's presented. But it turns out she's not the main villain. It's very interesting how this movie portrays it. And it's Queen whenever you want to be, basically. So whatever she wants to be, she can be. And when they first present it, you think it's the lady on the horse with the crown. But it turns out it's the horse that is the shape-shifting entity. And remember I was talking about what if the horse is on top or in control of things. And this is a meme right here. Originally, the horse, the heads are switched. And this lady was at a competition. And this horse just had this grin on its face and started doing whatever it wanted. And she got like over 100 penalties. And, she was crying the entire time. Which, I hate to laugh at someone crying. But, the humor of it. And what's crazy is this meme right here. I saw this right before I watched the Neverending Story. And this horse had like the same face on it. And Atreyu had the same face as this girl. So I'm laughing my head off while I'm supposed to be feeling sad. And I felt so bad for it. But that's just what made it so funny to me. Because, the kid wants to save his horse from the Swamp of Sorrows. And the horse is like, nah. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. So she changes her form to a multi-eyed tentacle monster made of red plasma Legos. And she says her plans are totally sinister. And then her friend or her assistant whispers to her, sincere. So they have a translation problem. And it actually turns out that they mean good, but the whole time they didn't understand each other. So they thought they were enemies and they just kept fighting, even though they both kind of wanted the same thing, which is interesting. The two becoming one, which is the whole idea of Sirius. And there was this movie called Nimona that was released of this red shape-shifting girl that basically is seen as evil, but she's not actually evil. And she has to prove her innocence and, relates it back to the whale and, the mind of God and consciousness. But if you saw it from the outside, you go, oh, that's an evil demon monster. Yet, that's not the whole story. So, the red plasma being is saying, all you need to do is participate in a matrimonial ceremony or a ritual. And she says, I'll tell you in the universal language. And she says, is it math? And the language that unites all the planets in our system. And I just want to say really quick that I had a meme about it earlier, how it relates to Hellraiser as well in mathematics. And I've talked about it before, but me and mathematics don't vibe. Like, I understand the concepts, but if you tell me to sit down there and write out all the equations and to really care about that beyond their application, like, hey, if you need this equation right now, like, how many times has the quadratic formula helped my life for how many times I wrote down that sucker? And Society of Schools taught stuff that was actually applicable in life. And right here, she turns into Saturn when she's talking about all the planets in our system and the language that unites it. And someone says, oh no, are we in a musical? Are we in a universe right now? And Batman's like, yep, get ready. And Batman's also now a hugely multiversal person. And he always represents the person that doesn't really have superpowers, that has to rely on his intelligence and technology, kind of like we have to now. And that in the newest comic run that I've talked about, Absolute Batman, that's like one of the darkest, craziest versions ever, is all in the mind of God of this main villain right here, who's seen as like primordial evil itself, called Darkseid. And there's so many jokes about this that basically Darkseid was so fed up with Batman and all of his multiversal versions that he basically made a hell for Batman to like feed off his misery, and also train a super soldier for him to go to war with the multiverse. It's just kind of like a little bit of everything, but it's all because it's in the mind of this supervillain who has a vendetta against, Batman, or was seen as the average person trying to be a superhero. And right here she has this song. It says, don't worry, I'm totally not one of those evil queens. Well, she has like a pitchfork and horns and a tail. And I totally won't imprison your family. Like a spider without a web or a fool without a queen. And, once again, we're back to that spider idea or the Whore of Babylon. And she starts like showing them their wildest imagination. and kind of to win them over. So right here she has this scene where she's like, I'm the least evil person you ever met, and she has this like evil grin. But it turns out in the end, like I was saying, she wasn't evil, and we don't really know the customs of other intelligent species, really. So for us to judge it like humanity, I think is just going to lead to personal translation issues. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But just how this scene right here, where they're walking up the stairs and like in the mind of something, it reminded me of Loki that we keep talking about, and how he becomes like the mind of God that everyone's walking in. And I found these two old comics of like God at a computer dropping a piano on someone, and here he's baking earthquake. Something tells me this thing's only half baked. And the generative eggs of creation right there, which I've talked about a lot before. And what's crazy about this movie is all the super characters like Batman reference previous incarnations of themselves. So like here he mentions Adam West Batman, like the 1960s Adam West Batman, which I have weird personal synchronicities to as well in my family. Not a crazy way, but it's just weird how it shows up again. And just fourth wall breaking, how that has to do with memes and comedy and Deadpool. And here Batman says, please marry me. And I was just talking about Deadpool, that it's weird in these stories, especially with the kind of like the weirdly comedic hero's journey that we're in, the less serious version of the hero's journey, that it repeats back to this idea of, clowns, goth chicks, death. I was talking about earlier with that Summers video, the girl that had like the black cat outfit on with the death earrings, and she's all pale looking, and how that's related to like this, circus guy. And how in the newest Avatar movie, where the guy on the right is the consciousness of that guy. So like his consciousness has moved to a new body, and basically he gets in a relationship with the new villain, who is the inverted feminine. And there's all these memes about it, but about like humanity intermingling with these alien beings, and how they're pre-programming us and especially our society right now and the youth to do this. Like this is a popular meme, especially this one right here, where he shows her fire. So this generative force that he can bring into her existence, like the Whore of Babylon, that she can change reality with, and how that makes her real excited. And this one's about fire, but the last one was about water. You go from a water world to a fire world, and how it's about these Jesus whales, and how they're like the most intelligent thing there, and how their brain juice lets you live forever. So they harness, whales. So back to Lego. That was a fun little tangent. He meets his future self, the main character, and he's saying like, if you're me, why do you sound so different? And he goes on this whole monologue that his future self was trapped. Well, in the past, he was trapped under the dryer, and he was forgotten about. So he had to learn to change himself and like change fate itself. Because in the Lego movie, if Legos aren't moved by the creator, it's kind of like Toy Story. Like if in Toy Story you left a toy under the dryer, the toy has to stay there. Like, yeah, it can kind of move around a little bit, but like canonically it's stuck. Yet he was talking about how he was alone with nothing but anger, and that was the key to his freedom. And I kind of want to talk about the hero's journey right now, because one of the biggest themes of our reality that I've seen repeating is that this character right here that I've talked about multiple times, that ends up resetting reality into something new, is really depressed. And this is a popular meme of him because he's sitting in this chair being overwhelmed by reality. And I relate to that, but that's only what I feel half of it. And the other half is why my channel picture and logo is based off the game Azura's Wrath, because that wrath and anger of being stuck in a false reality or matrix that sucks, like this Lego guy right here, that's one of the ways you can get out of it. Yet when he's done with it at the very end of the movie and breaks the cycle, then he can be at peace. But as long as he's in that fake false reality that's built upon so much pain and suffering, he can't be at true peace. And like I was saying earlier, when the celestial gods aren't doing their job right, then that can lead to some emotions. And those emotions can lead to your freedom and spiritual growth, as long as you don't get stuck there or turn evil. So, it was not time for me to take a step. I was real. I was no longer what I used to be. So, like, he's actually moving in the real world, and he goes find Lego bits for himself. So he's not lame anymore, and he gives himself a makeover. And just the idea of, like, Excalibur, that his name is Arthur Pendragon. So, the Pen Kundalini force riding out reality, and he goes from a nobody to a somebody, and, the divine play between good and evil, and your role in that reality creation. So he's realizing that he has to go back to the future to save the future, and to erase the unbearable pain that I experienced. And I don't think this quote right here is right, but it just fits so well that he's talking about a more convoluted occult time travel. I don't think the word occult's there, but it kind of sounded like it. It's kind of crazy if it is. So he rips off and reconstructs just about every time trope you can think of, time travel trope, like the DeLorean from Back to the Future, the phone book from Bill and Ted, the TARDIS from Doctor Who, the H.G. Wells time machine, Skynet's time machine. So, we're back to Terminator, and Terminator gave itself, it's like, like I was saying earlier, Skynet from the future sent the technology back to the past so they could reverse engineer it and open up the gate so it could take over the world. So, it did the same thing. So wouldn't it make sense that good does the same thing? And it has to do with this blue plasma right here as well, and how he builds a spaceship out of it. And he goes back in time to get a crew, and there are all these velociraptors that say, hey, I love tennis. And we'll go back to the tennis thing later as well, and how all these ball games relate to our reality, and especially the elites in our world. So, he gets all the Kundalini velociraptors, and that was the moment where he uses the time travel from Back to the Future. So, the blue plasma once again, and related in Back to the Future itself, it's blue plasma that allows them to travel through space and time. And there's this cool parallel where it's, he goes on his journey and shows them flying, but in the real world, the kid moves the spaceship and takes it to the other dimension, or his sister's room. And so in his sister's room, where she builds all the Lego sets, they're trying to rehabilitate the people from the other universe. And there's these Infinite Reflection Self-Free Education Celebrity Center run by vampires. And you can see self-free is like power-free, so like they don't have the generative force. And spiritual sounds like a trap. This guy is a vampire, and not only that, an attractive vampire. And he's saying, like, I'm a teen vampire. I like to talk about feelings and how we're in love. And then it moves over to Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis is randomly in this movie. And I've talked about before how it, I don't know if I have it here. We'll go back to it later about how Bruce Willis relates to 9/11 and the two becoming one and the hero's journey and the last person you'd expect to save the day, saving the day. And they just like put him right in this movie. And it's funny. And he sees himself as Bruce Willis, not the guy in the movie. Like, he knows he's, fourth wall breaking in his own movie. And, how that's related to, once again, Sirius and clowns and Saturn. And this is where they're going to do the matrimony ceremony with the red plasma being. And this pyramid right here just reminded me of Katy Perry's Dark Horse, where she takes the generative force of a real human being and goes to the top of this pyramid to start the perfect storm, which is red plasma, funnily enough right there, and turns the main character into a dog and, subservient. And I'll get back to that later as well. And so we have Bianca's room, which is his sister's room, and we have at least one Saturn there, and we have inverted stars and the suns, and how the main character is also related to Saturn as well in this scene, and how, the clock on the wall is actually real somewhere, and how it's next to the inverted star and light. And how I see dolphins relating to whales. They have some of the biggest brains, so we dream, they dream. We can control reality with dreams in the subconscious. So why can't dolphins, and there's a lot of conspiracies I won't go into here about how they might be a lot smarter than we might think. I mean, the CIA was giving them LSD and trying to translate their language at some point. Like, there's something there. And The Simpsons, like, I've talked about that many times before. The dolphin rabbit hole goes deep. Phrasing. So they're in the children's room, but they're arguing over the Lego sets. They can't agree on the narrative. Like, they're both having their own narrative structure, and it's colliding. And their mom says, "You're going to put everything in a box. Like, you're going to work together, or you're not." And so back down there, the kid's next to a rocket, and there's a plane in the background. So once again, this idea of ascension and your imagination coming to life. And you even have the torch of the Statue of Liberty. And in Ghostbusters 2, the Statue of Liberty comes to life. So, like, the imagination coming to life, the torch of reality that you're choosing. Yet, because they couldn't work together, it all has to be put in the box. Or the Great Nothing. And once again, back to Saturn and star power. And, putting all the Legos in the box. Or sucking it into the Great Nothing. And so it turns out that the main character's future self is actually pretty evil and is like trapping him under the dryer, and, in this horrible reality, to teach him a lesson. And they're having a flashback to, that heart that was first eaten, that first care, and how it's evolved and where it's gone. And how the people in the void decide that they're not going to be stuck there, so they build their way out of the abyss using technology. And they have this big space fight, but it reminds me of, why the rich people here are building their own rockets so they can go to their own place in the multiverse and not be here anymore. Because the idea, anyways, if we can read minds and have superpowers, like, they can't do this. They can't do that. So they need to go somewhere where it's only technology and all that magic and energy has been taken away, and that they can do the cycle we've been going to, so they can do it again. They'll be the people that come from heaven that are the bad people that, set up all these, institutions and centers and bloodlines and whatnot, like the Dagon movie I was talking about earlier. So in, like, Back to the Future, when someone get erased because they're no longer relevant to the story, the same thing happens to his future self, and, his future self gets redeemed a bit, and they end up playing together and merging their stories in a moral way. And, the parents are happy, the higher-ups are happy, the system's working as it should. But it's just crazy how this movie has so many fourth wall-breaking layers to it. How, like, in the credits, they have, like, this Lego wheel spinning, like time itself spinning. And, all the characters are shown, and it shows, like, even the movie itself, and, how the people are aware of their characters in the movie, in the Lego movie. Like, for a kids' movie, it goes deep. And I want to say, for the person who recommended that movie, I want to say thank you for that. And if anyone else has any movies like that, I'd love to hear it. So moving on, this is like, I don't think I've ever actually talked to someone seriously about this movie beyond, like, a few words, because very few people have seen this, but this one holds a very special place in my heart because it shows things in a way that you can visualize that few other movies don't. And it's mainly how this cycle is shown and the wealth of the rich people. So the beginning is a Navajo creation story of an infant crying, but there was lightning flashing everywhere, so that plasma energy, and where the peak meets the sky, so where the heavens meet the earth. And when he looked down at his feet and the lightning ceased, he saw a giant stone figure, the birth of this new generation. And throughout this entire film, there's this guy writing at a desk in the desert with a pen that's filled with blue blood that he was given by the richest person in the world, that he got to go write basically the new story. It's been a while since I've seen it. It's a very confusing movie, very symbolic. So the richest person on earth here is eating an apple, and he pretends to be a hobo, and he'll go down into society and get into fist fights with homeless people. Yet he has this secret Batman cave, and he goes up this elevator into the mountains. And I want you to think back to that guy I was talking about earlier that was talking about Epstein's Island and the temple on it, and where do the tunnels go. That this guy, has this giant tunnel that takes him up to this giant, like, Olympian mansion on top of the hill where no one can see, and he's like looking down on everybody. And it's just crazy to me. I know some of it's CG, but this movie makes me wonder where they draw the line with that stuff, because like scenes like this, just like normal people don't get access to this stuff, so it's really kind of hard to tell, like, you know, is this real or not? And even years ago, thinking about that. So it splits between the evil and the good. So in the good natural way, this guy's like possessed to go into the desert, climb up this hole in the rock, and make love to the rock. And it goes back to the evil people, and they make a point to show the Lion's Gate, which I talked about in the last few episodes, and how it relates to my own story, and how that relates to these secret societies and this plan they have. And, you know, there's good and bad side to it. So he goes up to this giant golden door that has all these myth and legends on it and symbology. And when he, you know, goes to identify himself, it starts playing a highlight of his life. Like, they have all these pictures from his childhood. Like, they know everything about him, and it creeps him out. And the first thing they show are these two dogs, you know, these two serious dogs, you know, this time loop. And there's all these stone people in the garden, and these are people that he's captured. Not literally, but he'll explain in a little bit that whenever he gets someone to join into his system and, you know, become subservient, and he really likes them, he'll make a stone statue to remember them by. And there's a lot of symbology, like I said. Like later, there's this lady he calls up, and the limo's this giant serpent, you know, bringing her up there, and they're like scanning her eyeballs. So like they're really getting to know who she is. And here they're playing tennis. You know, earlier I was talking about the Velociraptors in the Lego movie, talking about tennis and, you know, the generative force. And here, like, in the background, wondering, like, is this a real place somewhere? Because I could imagine they have stuff like this. So later on, a guy goes back to the, you know, the hole in the rock. And I also wanted to say that this place in the movie, they make a point to say that there's uranium there. So this atomic generative force is there already. And the rich people are trying to buy it up. But that's all part of the overall plan that they have. And this dude finds a baby. And it turns out that this baby weighs like 1,000 pounds. Like, it's not a normal baby. They have to get like a truck to pull up the carriage, and like they're driving it around. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's the magical stone baby. We've heard about this in the legends. So the lady that went up the snake to the rich guy is having a complete makeover. You know, there's this gold mask ritual you can look up that have to do with the elite. And she's basically like signing her life away here to get a lot of money. You know, she has good reasons to do it, but, you know, she still ends up where she is. And it's to look exactly like the wife of the richest person in the movie. And in this movie, it's the guy that plays John Malkovich, which I've covered many times, you know, being in the mind of John Malkovich, you know, taking over the mind of God and choosing where to go with it. And in this instance, you know, this is what he did with it. And, you know, back to the guy randomly riding in the desert in a crazed way with a blue blood pen. Back to the rich people, and they're having this big ceremony, and like this, like, is this real somewhere? I mean, it looks very nice. It'd be cool to go there for a little bit. So they have this ritual where they have this giant trebuchet, and they launch a car, like this old pristine car, off a cliff. So they have all these sacrifice rituals, and they're hoarding all this awesome stuff. That'd be great if everyone had access to it, and just wasting it in blatant shows and ancient rituals and all that. So the Navajo people start their ritual, which is a lot more organic and natural. So some of these people are like the statues that he made in the garden, and they're kept down in these cells here. And the main character gets, when he meets them, in this room where he controls the world. So he has like a map of every country, you know, with all these paintings and gods everywhere, you know, manipulating it all over duality and the checkerboard floor. And one of his requests is to open, and he's the guy that's been riding in the desert. He gets him to open up the cages, and if the people want to leave, they can. And the lady is the only one that pretty much does. Like, everyone else stays because they like their little compartments. And it's a lot like the Snowpiercer movie. All the rich elite people stay in their lane. They do not rock the boat because, you know, they like what they're doing in a way. You know, even if it does trap them in a false reality and cage. You know, the freedom and the money to do that because, you know, they get an artificial amount of money from this rich guy. You know, so he can have access to their talents. So the movie ends, and he does this giant, like, Egyptian ritual, where he buries himself with all of his possessions, and there's a bunch of dogs in the background, and, mummifying himself in this ancient, elaborate ritual. As the Navajos start doing their native ritual, and, once again, back to the idea of flying and reshaping reality. And the movie ends with a giant stone baby that walks in and basically destroys the city and resets, all the greed. But the idea is, the rich people will come back. They know they're eternal in a way, and that the cycle will start again. And, back to the guy with the blue blood pen writing reality. How does it end for him? Excuse me. And, the divine care comes back that he hasn't been seeing around for a long time. But he's finally reunited with her, in this kind of like afterlife moment of, going on the hero's journey and rewriting reality. And I don't usually put the final credits, but there are some very interesting companies here, like Royal Road, or you have the frog company Tolmut, and you have Lightcraft and things like that, the light reshaping reality and how that has to do with rich people and castles and frogs and things like that. So I kind of want to take side tangent to this comedy show. It's just been really reverberating in my life that this comic was talking about. Well, first of all, he was talking about an exchange of energy. And he was talking about, with some people, you just have to be positive and it all works out. He's talking about that's a very Wiccan way of thinking, or a very manifestation way of thinking. And I'm not going to, agree or disagree with that. Yet it also makes me think there's a balance set too, because there's a lot of people that never allow the negative in, and I don't see the balance. Like, if you can never take off that mask ever and go, hey, there's, a problem that hasn't gone away yet, because it'll just leave you, it's like, that doesn't seem very good. It's like, it sounds like you got half of the way there. But it's hard to judge that, and it's on an individual basis. So he's saying here that there's a other way of looking at it, the Roman Catholic way. And he's saying, tell me how bad it is going to be. I'll accept it, and then we'll go on our day and have lunch and figure out a way to, work it out. And that's a lot of how I operate. Like, give me the brass tacks, and I can start working and processing on it. And, not being stuck in this loop where, people can't even acknowledge it's happening because they can't handle any negativity. And he's saying, it's going to happen. You're going to be crucified. But it's all right, buddy. Let me eat my dinner with my buddies, and then we'll go do it. It's like, yeah, I'll go on the hero's journey, but let's at least acknowledge the elephant in the room, have, a nice meal and talk about it and other things, and then we can go do it instead of just trying to put your head in the sand till you can't ignore it anymore, and you don't have any time to have that nice meal. And he's talking about how the standard of living is going down and how we're getting used to that. And first-class airlines are a great example of this, and how we keep talking about airlines and making your dreams come true. That he's saying, like, first class is special because it's a chair you can fit in. That's it. That's all it is. But they make coach class so utterly crap that by the time you get up there, you're like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. My kneecaps aren't turning inside out. Comedy is not supposed to be funny. It's supposed to tell the truth, and then that's funny. So, that's what he's kind of saying. Like, it's funny because he's actually willing to admit what everyone just kind of passively accepts and rarely talks about. Which is, and, this whole channel of mine is about raising the standard of living. And just talking about how, this is targeted at, the younger generations and breaking their spirit and willpower. And, that we're all in this together. But also, acknowledging being tired. Because here's this one I found of Row, Row, Row Your Boat. The song for everyone who's tired but still rowing. And, a big part of me is tired right now. This quote from Shawshank Redemption. I'm tired, boss. I'm tired of being on the road. Lonely as a sparrow in the rain. I'm tired of never having a buddy to be going with, to tell me where's we's going to, coming from or why. Mostly I'm tired of people being ugly to each other. I'm tired of all the pain I feel and hear in the world every day. There's too much of it. It's like pieces of glass in my head all the time. It's a thing to be empathetical here. And, the whole movie about the Shawshank Redemption is someone who had that shining in the Stephen King universe and could kind of change reality and bring things back to life. But he had to bear the suffering and pain. And, it just got to the point where he didn't really want to be here anymore. Like, he felt like he had done his part. And there's this scene here where he's, like, watching a film, but it always reminds me of, like, the scene from In the Mouth of Madness and, the observer effect and realizing the story you're in and what you can do about changing it. And what happens, if the bubble you're in is about to pop. If things are going in a way, and I kind of have this one right here of a grid down video, but, of harnessing electricity and trying to preserve your standard of living in the best moral ways possible, and actually try and have a plan for it and find other people that want to have a plan for it, and pooling resources so we don't have to do it all alone like the Amish class. Because if I have to learn everything I need to know, there's not enough time left, in my opinion. Even if I did win the lottery, like, it would help. But it's like like, back to the Titanic idea. If you some guy said to me, "Oh, I want to get off the Titanic," and then I just kind of left them. If I agreed with them, but then I left them because I was expecting them to go do it all on their own, I think that's not going to go much longer because there's just not time. And all the people that know how to reverse engineer those systems in a moral way and have been doing it for their entire lives, we can all share that experience if we're all going to the same place. And we don't have to, I'm all about learning new things, but like I said, the balance. Like, if you're just expecting me to, learn, advanced building and electronics and, farming and animal husbandry and, everything else conceivable, and like the rules, that we're going to have to replace the crappy government ones with, because, hey, there won't be any Titanic or government left. The rich people will just go to the submarine, wait it out, collect the insurance money, and come back with a robo-Titanic and scoop up who's left or who isn't already in a moral place that can stand up and draw a line for themselves and say, hey, no, we're this vibration, and we're going to respond accordingly in a moral way if you try to force that negative vibration on us. And that you can't really do that without supplies and food. And hear from this thing saying, we will not abandon these souls. And that's the whole idea. I keep talking about these drop pods from these fictional universes about going where the darkness is thickest to try to save souls and humanity. And how that keeps reverberating in all these stories, and wondering how different from that story that really is. And earlier, like I was saying, with the You Do It Well, this interdimensional time spirit liberation that comes when evil is at its height, that you also have the Doom universe, that this Doom guy is also trapped between cycles, and he's unleashed because he's what demons fear. And they bridge, fantasy with sci-fi. And I want to talk about the Frog Prince here for a little bit before I go deeper, because this is going to kind of go back into what our story seems to be in a weird way, or at least what's connected to mine. Because you have this frog that's related to meme magic and Kundalini, and the idea of the Frog Prince is he has the potential to be that ascended person, yet usually he needs that divine care. And that's usually what gets him going there. If he gets that kiss from the divine care, he can become a king. And that's what in the Shrek movie as well, that the king of Far, Far Away was originally a frog that someone cared enough to see what was underneath to actually, see the love. And the dark side of that is like the Whore of Babylon, that it's looking for that ascended Kundalini individual, that king energy as well, to subvert and reshape reality. And how, like I was saying earlier, how Deadpool is related to death. We could also see this as like the whole Saturn idea, and how that's connected to the primordial incarnation of evil, and how that's connected to death, but it's connected to comedy, it's connected to love and laughter. And in the Matrix movie, the new one, they put Neo and Trinity in these two pods right next to each other. So you have the ascended masculine, awakened individual, and the divine care, who he needs to wake up. And so they can finally be together because they're powering the Matrix by putting them right next to each other, but won't let them come together ever for except for moments. And this is gonna be a fun one. I had a dream a few weeks ago, and it had to especially do with goth girls, but not only that, about how a lot of them, they're very spiritually damaged. And not to say that it's like a mean way, but I mean, that's kind of the whole idea about it, is that they're kind of into dark things. It's like the whole idea. And I found this picture right here of a goth girl sitting on the lap of a dude dressing up as a goat demon. And, they both have pentagrams on them. And the one on her arm, right next to the bats and the hearts, is one that I've seen before, and it's from one of the people that used to be in the original Jackass show, Bam Margaritas. And he basically went on a 20-year meth bender, yet while he was doing it, he made his own language called Fat Vampire. And you see on the right there is that little inverted pentagram that looks like a heart as well, and it's next to the snake, the Kundalini force. And he has that tattooed on him as well. So it just made me think of that, because he's like the most famous person I know that is connected to, and just the hilarity that he made a satanic language based upon a fat vampire. That just seems so much like our reality, and it's from the guy from Jackass. Yes, he's the guy that will make our fat vampire language on a meth bender. And how this popped up literally the next day, that he's with his parents, that they're trying to present oh, hey, we had rehab, it wasn't that weird, what we're doing, we weren't evil. And how that symbol's painted on the house behind them, but also the death symbols as well. So it's just subtle. And here's Tim Dillon again, said, I left the next day. That's kind of the feeling I have, we should talk about leaving. There's this movie called Succubus, and it has to especially do with technology, because that's how it really interacts, and how it uses it to shapeshift and cover up its actual nature. And it's hard to see in this, but its actual form is just this black goo mass thing, and that all the allure is just basically a psychic projection based upon your own fantasies, kind of trying to lure you. And I kind of wanted to relate that back to Diablo and Lilith, because in that story, her and an angel leaving the eternal fight between light and darkness to kind of make their own story, that's what started humanity. And the original Nephilim, that had the god's blood and superpowers, but then it didn't go very well, and heaven and hell had to step in, because demons and angels were fighting each other on the mortal plane, and it was not a good deal. So they were all right, we're going to reset this, take away the superpowers, we're going to take away the angels, we're going to send Lilith, back to slumber in the abyss, and the heroic angel guy is going to be reincarnated without his memory, and we're just going to reset humanity so they can't see angels and demons and just let them live out their lives. But then, hey, Lilith comes back from the abyss. Kind of like that Hellraiser meme, and just restarts itself. But that it's related to technology and sci-fi as well. And how it needs the real human being like Trinity and Neo, like I was just talking about, to perpetuate itself, which is the whole plot of the movie. And just back to, hey, here's the guy who's trying to put a chip in your brain and reshape reality and make your life worse in a lot of ways. And lied about it. And like I was saying, one of the biggest pre-programming websites called 4chan has a daily thread about how to make spiritual pacts with succubi. And that if you read these, which I've done sparingly over a long time, because I got the gist a long time ago, that they're doing energy work to prepare themselves for the afterlife, which is basically this idea. It's one of the most popular things in Japan right now. It's called a Seki, where you die and you go to basically your fantasy land. So people are making pacts with demons to do energy work to prepare themselves for the afterlife, which they see as their fantasy. And here's a joke from the Muppets talking about how the wish fulfillment isekai is like a huge theme this year. And he's like, these writers really need to get some more real life experience to help with their stories. Talking to women, learning swordsmanship? No, jumping in front of a truck. Because that's usually the way they do it, is they like get hit by a truck or fall off a cliff or something, and that leads them to this new universe. And kind of back to that idea of like Warhammer 40k mixed with this like anthropomorphic shape-shifting entity that, they both want different things. And I found this meme while making it that I wanted to include, because originally this guy tries to make fun of a guy for going to see Godzilla and calling him like a man-child. And the guy responded to it, said, "Hey buddy, I've looked at adult content of Godzilla a lot. You think you can depict me as a neckbeard doge and suddenly make me realize what a man-child I've become? Get it together, man." And just one of the biggest video games in our reality right now, Fortnite, all the realities are clashing, and you can see like the portal opening and one universe is meeting another, and they have giant robots and superheroes and Godzilla, and there's a giant red plasma tentacle monster that's suplexing Godzilla into a giant robot as Homer Simpson, and the main characters shoot at him with Uzis. It's oddly accurate, I think, of what they want to do, and back to the Simpson idea kind of bleeding through reality. And to talk more about the human condition, I believe this is a real picture of a guy that has Buzz Lightyear in a place it shouldn't be. He's got a friend in him. I always think of like, welcome to the human condition. My oh my, what it is, especially as it gets unveiled. And back to that idea of Paper Mario, and also in the background has the idea of the halo and the drop pod right there, about how he has a magical pencil that gets to reshape his reality, but he hasn't cleaned up his room and laid a foundation, and his brother gets a hold of it and combines the inverted feminine masculine into one being, kind of like the Baphomet, and tries to drag this real human being back into this inferno or hell that it's cast back into, because it doesn't go well. And there's this meme, it's called the author's barely disguised fetish, but this is, okay, the author ain't even trying to hide it this time. It's just very obvious, and how that kind of goes back to the idea of the Templars and this idea of like rewriting humanity, but back to the idea of Call of Duty Zombies and how it relates to technology and turning people into zombies, and how that relates to an alien invasion and interdimensional versions of yourself in the multiverse, and the generative Easter egg, and secret societies, and me just wondering, can you redeem that? Is it supposed to be redeemed? Well, if you stick around to find out, I guess we'll find out. Sorry, Chad, but this is real life. The monkey gets the girl. This is a huge meme, and how we're talking about the monkey and Kundalini Ascension and the Frog Prince and all that. And once again, how the monkey relates to like Dragon Ball Z and making your wish come true and becoming a superhero and escaping false matrix, which is mainly more on the Sun Wukong side, but how the sun god and related to a monkey relate to a lot of these other Japanese shows that they keep retelling the story with a new face. And how in Naruto right here that he also has a transcendental spirit that looks like a fox that is placed into him kind of as like a secret weapon, because it's like a force of nature, but eventually he learns to cooperate with it, and they both want to see a better future, so they work together. And there's like different versions of them, and the hero's journey, and how he redeems the evil and the dark side of that fox demon for a better world. Like he redeems his, but then he redeems like the even eviler version of himself, and it just keeps going on and on and on. And how in Chainsaw Man, he has this symbiotic relationship with a demon that is basically fear come to life itself, but manifested in our world. and working with a real human being because they disagree with the power structure and want to see a better world. And how this leads, it's kind of an extreme version of animal hybridism, but, imagination coming to life and superpowers. And how that relates to the Doom universe and dragons and, the Kundalini spirit and technology and how it all comes together. But, and really hitting home, all these ideas and how it relates. I don't want to just make it about me, but just like here, when I put it all down, that my main sign is Aquarius, that both the high schools I went to, if you put the symbols together, it makes Capricorn, and there's only like a 3-day difference there, and they're both Saturn, so it's just like, a ginger 3-foot, a tall ginger guy that has a asphyxiation with goths and clowns and being funny and lizards and dogs. I'm a dog dude, and dogs are around my life weirdly, and Saturn, and the whole fisherman thing, and how it relates to like how my name literally means like I'm here to make a better society, and how like that reverberates even to like my parents and grandparents and just the schools I went to. It's just like, it's so blunt. Never tell me the odds, because who knows how it's all going to play out. It's just really weird, because a lot of people I listen to, they don't, they talk about what's going to happen, but they don't really talk about like, oh yeah, I'm like, I seem to be oddly connected to this in a weird spot, and all the symbology checks out in like every way to the thing I'm trying to do, in a way that, at least in a flesh suit, I couldn't have planned. So, yeah. And, looking at the narrative structure, that if you find yourself in a spooky tale, you can come to terms with it and, think of something better and try to build that in our reality. You best start believing societies, Mrs. Turner. We live in one. And this goes many times. The original meme is he's trying to tell her ghost exists, and that you're in a ghost story, even if you thought... Because that's the whole idea of a horror movie, that you don't think you're in a horror movie until the guy is like, oh, I'm actually a ghost. Like, and same thing with cyber dystopias and, biblical revelation. And I even found one with Lord of the Rings, like, because Gandalf shows back up, who represents the light and the love on the hero's journey. It's like, yeah, you're in a ghost story, buddy. You best start believing in cringe compilations, because you're in one. How it has to do with memes, the generative force, and just saying this makes part of me cringe. Like, really, I'm going on here and talking about how, it has to do with me, but I'd be lying if all those things didn't lie up. So, yeah. And record these horror classics with a cart twist. The track is empty. The undead are not. Which movie inspired these scenes? Swipe left if you dare. As there's like a red plasma portal opening, and as the observer effects at plays, and we're in the mind of God and trying to figure out, hey, what are we going to do about all this weirdness and these demonic clowns and being trapped in a simulation and a cube? And my vote is to go someplace better. That was really, Beetlejuice being a clown and whatnot. And I always think of this verse from Revelation, which is 9:11. Yes. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they had maintained. They called out with a loud voice, "Hey, how long's this gonna take? I'm tired of watching this here." To paraphrase. Then each was given a white robe, and they were told to wait a little longer, till the full number of their fellow servants were killed just as the way they had. You got to tell their story, got to show their, emotional story and what they're going to do, their hero's journey, and that we have to shorten time itself because it's going to be so gnarly that the angels, people watching from heaven who aren't even there, just watching, are going to be like, yo, can we speed this up? Yo. And God's like, let it cook. Let them cook. Let it play out. Let the narrative structure build. So, this right here speaks so much to my heart and was in my original presentation I made, part 1, I believe, around then, of this crazy meme music video that came out of nowhere about having to do with aliens and false realities and simulations, and more importantly, how to break the loop in a good way. And it all starts with this alien. And, how the military is reacting to it. It has a bunch of funny dancing and whatnot. But under the core of it all, it's about how the Men in Black are trying to steal their technology, and the Men in Black work for the Illuminati, who are playing their chessboard. And, with their serpent creepy god in the background, they recover the UFO alien technology that hint came from the future, Back to the Future, and they reverse engineer it in underground secret military bases. And this is Project Bluebeam that they're using to build a Stargate to, a red plasma Stargate to drop the veil between heaven and hell and start biblical prophecy. And that's even the Illuminati's greatest fear, and now their fear is coming true. And that the dragon is coming, the inverted kundalini. And that, it goes all biblically here and say the stars will fall from the sky. The world will be consumed by chaos. And, you have alien ships in the background. And it goes up to this angel guy that's with a biblical angel that has all the eyeballs. And he's talking about how he's done this 250,000 times. And here it kind of represents hell is all this fear and despair and all these hands reaching up and, as he's falling into matter itself. And, this is kind of like the drop pod representation I keep talking about in a sci-fi way, the good energy going down into hell itself, into the time loop. And here it kind of shows like Jesus there. But this idea that the good keeps recycling it, that, Groundhog Day keeps recycling until the good guy actually finishes the hero's journey. And that this angel was this kid, and who in the future is the alien. So it's the same soul, it's just where you are at time. And he didn't stay in his flesh suit forever, but then he himself, who's now the alien, crash lands back from the future, and the Men in Black show up and try to take him hostage, and they're saying we're preventing invasion. And the alien UFO basically wipes everyone's memory and creates a new time loop because it has that. But the Men in Black figure out they're in a time loop, and that Earth was secured because no one could see it. It's kind of like the dark forest theory. And now that the alien made the time loop, that these interdimensional reptilian beings can see us. And like Independence Day, they bring their alien ships to harvest us and our resources. And that doesn't go very well for the people that didn't prepare for that. And how it has to do with plasma as well. And back to the Lego movie as well. And hello boys, I'm back. I just like putting that in there. So in the last few weeks, this guy made a new music video called Breaking the Loop. And it's kind of in the same universe. So this monster comes in with these red plasma eyes, and he's like, I'll take your soul. And it says on the wall right there, fear keeps us looped. Love breaks the loop. Children posters we all have. So this monster comes in, you have Spider-Man on the wall too, the interdimensional, and the cactus as well. We're at that point of reality, people. I'm trying to compare spiritual ascension with cactuses that I see randomly. It's going good places. So these kids start making fun of the monster because he's broke and he ain't got no shoes. So you're broker than a joke, for real. And he's like, no, I'll take your soul. And they just go through this song making fun of him. So, but it repeats. Like you can see like the Matrix clicks right there. So they make fun of him, but that wasn't the right thing to do. So he resets, and then the kid is like, I don't want to do this anymore. So he gives the monster his shoes. The soul, the empathy. Putting your shoe, wearing the other person's shoe. And he says like like, I understand when I don't feel good, and you had that look on your face, and I can tell you feel the same way, because like this dude was like captured by the military and treated, imprisoned, and he's got nothing. And it just reminds me of Cabin in the Woods, and Back to the Clown right there, and how that's related to like the most synchronistic video game that one of them that I've ever played, called SCP Secret Laboratory, that I was playing last night actually. So it's crazy how it reverberates in our reality, but how it's about capturing these entities and keeping them in underground facilities so that they can maintain the status quo in our reality and reverse engineer them to gain their technology and make AI and all that, I guess. So they give him a place to sleep even, and it says like, I know even the monster's scared. And the alien's watching from out there, and he can see the love in their heart, but he says The Shining, just like the Stephen King The Shining, where these psychic kids bring imagination to life, and how vampires try to harvest them, and how it has to do with whales and things like that, and how even the monster's heart was redeemed, and the alien's was as well. And the alien says he perceives all moments within loops. The flow of time to me is a changeable playlist. One loop holds their kindness, and one holds their despair. And the joke about being broke has left me broken. And, while he's holding a shoe and, seeing the shoe on the other person. And he decides to break the cycle. And, you have the 88 right there, like Back to the Future. And the comments are like, a moment of silence for those who couldn't break the loop. And the loop got broke. A song about being broken is about the time loop being broken, but, having empathy for those that don't have, and, raising their standard of living seemed to be the thing, that love, that empathy that broke the time loop. And that was the idea of the Loki show when he remade reality into the Tree of Life, that he did it because reality was falling apart into chaos, and he cared about the people there and wanted to give them a reality they could live in that made them happy, and wasn't this encroaching hell that seems to be happening, that it seems from every angle is trying to press your buttons and make you feel bad. And how that has to do with time loops and the Groundhog Day. And I just want to say that in Groundhog Day there's no nemesis, really. There's no evil guy. Phil's his own villain, yet and how that relates to our story as well, and Sirius and Saturn. I'll get back to that in a minute. So I've talked about Rick and Morty and simulations a lot, and I think I've even talked about this episode, but there's a part of it I really wanted to touch on. So this guy goes in this simulation that everyone there is his grandson, because his consciousness got split up when their simulation got reset and the power went off. So he's trying to tell them this isn't real life, this is a video game. The power went out, the game restarted, and your identity has been splintered into all the non-player characters or NPCs of life. So I jacked in as Roy, like the Matrix. That's the playable character. That's the player character. Matrix pods. So if this is going to be how hard it is, it's going to take a long time because he's having difficulty. And on the outside of the simulation video game, his granddaughter, why the power went out is because it's under like a terrorist attack, and he's saying like, do a Die Hard, and she's saying, what does a Die Hard mean? And it's funny because I was talking about this with the Lego movie and 9/11 and all that Bruce Willis is in, basically a horror movie, but he can't die. That he finds a way out of every problem and eventually saves the day. And, like it's about the two becoming one, and, the 9/11 ritual. And, he has the little lighter right there, so the generative male force, and just finding your way throughout all this chaos and trying to, save his wife or the divine feminine. And just, it hits home to me because I have, when I was in art class in college, we did a drawing of Bruce Willis from another movie. And it's currently one of the only pictures I have in my trailer right now, is like of Bruce Willis that, relates to Die Hard. And, when I look back, this all started because of the 9/11 podcast series. And like today I'm getting all these 9/11 ones, and just how that relates, and probably how I'll look like that if, this keeps going on, him from that movie. It's just, so she says, I've never seen Die Hard. But that ends up being perfect because the main character, Die Hard, doesn't know what's going on, but he goes through it anyway. And if he did know what was going to happen, then it wouldn't be Die Hard, because that's the whole... They go into that either, and he says, yeah, neither did the guy in Die Hard. Like, he didn't have the structure, but it's interesting when you do. And, how that relates, like, back to the Mouth of Madness and finding yourself in a narrative story and how to change it and come to terms with it. Just, whew. And how that relates to technology and how we're building these video games, but how the video games and AI need us to reverberate it and how it's building off each other. And I don't necessarily agree, but he's saying there's no God here, but I take that as like, hey, it's extra chaotic here. Like, it extra sucks here. And, in the background says, we are all grandsons, Mortys unite. And, the power structure has sent their goons in to ruin their day. And this lady's like, we're all one person splits into a lot of little pieces. We're just a grandson. It's like, you feel me, dog? Back to serious. And all of that. And you're not going to hurt me. You're me. And he's like, no, I'm Kevin. I'm a Marine. I'm 30. And she's like, no, you're his grandson, and we're in over our heads, and we miss our family. And he tears up and says, why does this always happen? And this, out of all of this, is the most synchronistic to me. Not the NPC player characters are being over your head, but why does this keep happening? And how we get to the story where we realize that, and we have to ask ourselves, what do we do moving forward? Why are you here? Where do you want to go? And if you agree with this, I would say please at least be vocal about it, because that's the very start of all of this. And time seems to be a-ticking. And that this whole goal is that if imagination does come to life, like this kids show that I watched growing up, that there's a place for all of that. And that you can make a good place where you can live in harmony with all this and see your dreams come true in a good way that isn't horrific to see. And that's one of my biggest hopes, that this isn't just for us. This isn't just for me now. This is for a lot of people and a lot of things, and really getting past those boundaries like the Frog Prince and seeing what's underneath and what's actually there and who people actually are underneath all the masks we've been wearing. And we're winding up soon, don't worry. It's funny, the Roy thing, it was originally supposed to be the ending of this, but I just kept adding stuff. So this is the Warhammer 40k universe, and this is one of the best animated shows they've made of it that was on Amazon. Part of a series called Secret Level, that were all about video games being brought to life with this really lifelike technology. And it follows this captain right here that's been in the story before, and it's also, the secret levels are related to Ready Player One and the Kundalini and the generative force of reality and plasma, changing the story and where you live, and how that's with Easter eggs. And I've brought up Easter eggs multiple times, but they're the things hidden in a video game that if you have enough knowledge, that you can find these hidden things left to you by the developers of the game, or God, or your higher self, if you want to think about it that way. And the final clue in Ready Player One was a secret room in a game called Adventure, which also has the Kundalini dragon right there, and the hero's journey, and finding that secret room that gives you control of reality, and how that relates, the virtual reality, and how we're going to be perceiving this imagination coming to life, and what those barriers actually are, especially when they're not there anymore. Now in the movie, there's this scene where all these people are lifted up and there's no gravity, and there's like blue plasma lights, and how that's related like back to the Lego movie and those UFOs, and how that's the catalyst, like in that Alien music video, of the dimensions opening up and the potential for this loop to be broken. So back to the Warhammer video, and this is also the universe, one of the universes with all those drop pods. So the main character in this is one of the few that can kind of be exposed to this chaotic energy and not be corrupted. And a lot of people doubt him because of that, yet it's also one of the reasons he's the main character, is that he can see all this trauma and walk out the other side uncorrupted. And in this video, they come face to face with this demon that can stop time itself. So it goes to all these people that are stuck in time, and it feeds off their fears and what they fear the most. And you can kind of see its eyeball opens up into like the abyss and has all this teeth around it, and it's a tentacle monster. So very symbolic. And you have the blue plasma right here, you know, the guy with the blue masculine plasma. But if you can't overcome fear, it's a lot like It from Stephen King with the deadlights, where, you know, it's your worst fear come to life, but it can like hypnotize you with it as well. And one of the people's main fears is that that main character turns to evil. Yet that fear itself is, you know, basically allows the demon to hurt them. And it gets to the main character, who's personified as this child walking around with this giant knife. And, you know, it's the idea of this hero's journey. You know, it's the kid inside that can still see the world, that innocence, yet is tempered in this world, and how he became a super soldier so he could stand up against this evil. And when he does this, you know, he's not afraid of that demon ultimately, so he can't be influenced by it, and he ends up destroying it. And time goes back to normal, and this giant blue plasma is released that was being held up. So, you know, it signifies the changing of this age. And it's also in things like Tron and the Never-Ending Story itself that has this, like, all this blue light plasma, and the hero's journey to reset reality, and how that connects back to the Loki show and the Avengers and Marvel. And like I said, a big theme of Space Marines from that Warhammer 40k universe is they shall know no fear. Like, that's a part of their training, is to try to get rid of fear, because that's what the demons feed on, and like they kind of need no fear to fight the monsters. And I've talked about this video game before called Elder Scrolls Skyrim. I played this a lot growing up, and I was looking at the trailer recently, and one of the big themes of it is these dragons come back that everyone thought was fake. And there's one person they fear, the dragons, and he's called the Dragonborn, but he's kind of like a hybrid in between. Like, he has the power of dragons, but he has his own free will, so he's not doing what the dragons are doing. And these games are called the Elder Scroll universe. And the Elder Scrolls in the game basically allow you to see reality itself, kind of like Neo with the Matrix code. And in that universe, you can become aware that you are a god in a dream, experience a dream, and you can choose to basically become part of the hive mind, or like recreate reality in a good or a bad way. And that's the plot of some of the video games, that some of the villains realize that they were in a dream, and that they could start lucid dreaming what they want, and that starts going in a bad way. But you know how that relates to technology and the Matrix. And one of these Japanese shows I've talked about before, where these imaginations come to life, I found this one guy right here that he looks for these cubes. And he's also known, this hero right here is known as the only hero able to oppose God, in quotes. You know, like the evil God hive mind of reality, thanks to his ability to manipulate space-time. So, you know, like stop time, like I was just talking about. And he collects these mysterious cubes that enable humans to contact with God and transform into monsters. So these black Saturn cubes that eventually can mutate people, you know, which we're doing with technology, if you think of it like the monolith from 2001 Space Odyssey, and just making imagination come to life, and how that relates to everything we've been talking about, and how that relates back to the Doom universe, and, you know, the Kundalini dragon, and the meeting of all these multiverses. But the big thing with Doom is he's the only one demons fear. And here he's being trapped in the dream by all these Cthulhu monsters, because like they can't handle him, so they have to contain him. So like I've been talking about with like the cyclical cycle, yet his heart energy at one point is too strong, so he breaks out of the Matrix. And it's kind of the same with Chainsaw Man, that he's the main demon that the rest of the demons fear, because the devil that Chainsaw Man eats, their names are erased from existence. Take, for example, death, war, hunger. There are many things in this world that humanity could be happier without. With Chainsaw Man's powers, I'll blot them out. And she's basically the whore of Babylon right there, but, taking this generative force, but that can rewrite reality itself in, like, fears. And this is a real life cosplay that someone did of that universe, of that girl right there talking about how she's going to harness their powers. That there's literal symbology of him being her pet and dog, and that she doesn't even let him talk, like he's just a dog. And, so much that people are acting this out in our own reality. And that in the beginning of the show, that she gives him this parasitic snail, and it's called Paradoxium at the end. And these snails aren't really alive, nor are they really dead. They're under the control of a parasite that controls their brain and their movements. And, she's using this to eventually take out the literal dog inside of them, that serious wolf spirit that all the other demons fear, that she wants to weaponize for her own means. And it's also crazy that, like, literally the night after I made this slide, I was playing that video game, SCP Laboratory, and one of the guys' name was named Paradoxium. Like, actually, like... So... But, back to this idea with Naruto about having this evil demon within inside of you that you have to learn to live with, or it can consume you. And how that relates to the transcendental spirit throughout space and time. And how in One Piece, there's even this inverted feminine that's guiding him in the duality chessboard, because he's the goofy guy that can change reality and make imagination come to life, but he is being played. At least that's what the symbology here is showing. And that character holding him is called the Devil Child, and can use her imagination to turn into a giant demon. Yet, who knows? She presents herself as good, but we'll have to see, because they're not that far in the game. Or in the show. So, one of the reasons this podcast was delayed so much was I went back and played these video games that were really well made and had a lot of occult stuff in them, and it took a little while, and I'm glad I did, yet I had to take time off to do that. So it's made by Arcane Studios, the two games I played, and they're, it's related to, like, Ark, and my channel was supposed to be named Ark, but I named it Arcs because it's not supposed to be a boat. And the star, summoning your imagination. And in the first game, and you have the hero with the moon in the background, and that's seen as the villain by everyone else, but has to save the day and bring judgment back to the world. But they have all this crazy technology in this universe that's powered by whales. So, like, they're purposely harvesting and, like, torturing whales so they can get the most out of them to maintain their reality and get scientific advancement. And, I've talked about the whale dreams and being in the dream of whales, and how it has to do with Dr. Sleep and Steam, and they call the psychic children, they feed off whales. So they're doing the same thing here to fuel their society, which is the same thing we did. And if the whales go away, then, the tentacles and the tentacle monsters multiply, and the dream becomes more of an evil dream because there's less real humanity and goodness in it, and it starts becoming more like a nightmare. And then the nightmare wants to invade other realities and dreams as well, because it's always hungry and not that great of a person. So in that video game, there's this being called the Outsider, who can see through space and time and give people a mark that gives them superpowers or magic. And he chooses a few people every generation to entertain him, and he'll give them magic powers and talk to you on your hero's journey, to good or evil, because you can choose in this game. But it's just interesting. It's kind of like Santa Claus, he sees you while you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. And what happens if you reject that past? And a lot of these games are about dealing with the implications of interacting with this interdimensional, like, abyssal being that gives you superpowers. And how that's also related, like I said, to Santa Claus and Krampus and trapping people in realities. Now, that also has to do with the moon. If the moon represents ascension with the Buddha on the moon, then it also, the flip side of the coin is it traps you. And how that's related, once again, to Sirius and Saturn and all of that. And the one I really want to talk about is Prey. Once again, with the moon Because the symbolism in this game is just ooh-wee. So, in the very beginning of the game, you wake up in your apartment and you're supposed to go on a helicopter ride that's going to take you to the moon. You know, how we keep talking about spiritual ascension. To go have these special scientific tests on you. And it turns out that's a simulation. You were in a simulation and they were recording you. And on that helicopter ride there that was a simulation and fake, they fourth wall break their own game. So like you're seeing the title of the game as you're flying, and like people who made the game in the background where the mountains are. So it's kind of interesting. And the whole premise is that you wake up on this space station that you thought you were going to in the simulation has been taken over by all these black goo tentacle monster, shape-shifting tentacle monsters. And humanity found these tentacle monsters in the abyss or space, and they found out that they could reverse engineer them and basically gain access to the Akashic records in a way. That you could map a brain's function and then find out which part of it you wanted it and basically copy and paste it in someone's brain. So if someone's a really good musician, you could scan their brain and then take that part that you wanted, then put it into your brain. The only thing about it, though, is that when you remove these, you remove the memories you made as well. So if you have one to be a piano player and then you want to get rid of it for whatever reason, everything past you being a piano player, you're going to forget. And this worked really good with the company because then you couldn't remember what you did at the company because they would take your neuromods. And one guy was saying that he installs one before every mission so he can choose if he wants to forget the mission he just went on and not feel guilty about what he did. So, you know, like what if you go to work and you don't remember what you did at work? You know, it's kind of like that idea, but it's a little bit more expensive, so they don't do it. And the creative director of Prey also did say that the simulation is ultimately still a reconstruction of reality. So things in the simulation likely did happen or would have happened. I also assume just for my own sanity, because if the simulation is every part is even partly fictional, then yes, the sky's the limit. And also does make sense with the way neuromods are explained to work. The device scans your brain's connectomes at the time of installation, models how they would look with a new aptitude installed, then performs that mutation using exotic material they found in the abyss from tentacle monsters. Removing the neuromod then becomes a matter of reverting your brain to the initial scan state. In theory, it's like reverting your hard drive to a backup state. And as the original Morgan demonstrated in the SimLab test, you know, where you thought you woke up and you were going to the moon, your brain isn't a deterministic machine, even when given the same outputs. So even if they keep putting them in its time loop simulation, there will be anomalies and variations like Neo from the Matrix. And these aliens with magic powers that eat and digest consciousness itself. And not only can they give you access to other people's memories, they can give you actual psychic powers as well. And as they assimilate people and kill them, they reconstruct these red plasma networks all over the space station. And these are basically like a brain they're building in their own way. That's all the memories that they sucked up like a vacuum cleaner. And then they kind of spin it out like a spider's web. They make references to that. And how they can shapeshift. So the whole time you're playing this game, you don't know where the enemies are. And almost every other horror game is scripted in a way that if there's a jump scare, some guy coded that in. Yet in this, they let the AI just kind of play around like, yes, in this part of the level, there's going to be 3 shapeshifting monsters, yet they could be anything and they're programmed to be anywhere. And if you play it 20 times, they're going to be 20 different things, or they'll be in 20 different spots. Like no playthrough will be identical because they are artificial intelligence programmed to do that. And they end up looking like a coffee mug. So they're saying here, they eat other minds. And here's an AI that the main character made of himself to help him on his hero's journey. So it's just like layer after layer of like what is real. And this right here is so weird that more often called white noise due to the telltale spots, said to be like static in the victim's eye. It isn't just a medical condition, and it's more than a wild, almost witch doctor-like claims of psychic ability. It's disfranchisement. It says the victim can never have a neuromod, nor can their brain be mapped. It's the end of everything that is about a person. Who is this company to decide? We will let them add a biological caste system to the human race. So it's just interesting that they're saying people with visual snow and the white noise can't enter the hive mind. They can't be scanned by this artificial entity. And can you guess who has visual snow and tinnitus and the white noise? Me. I've just gotten so used to it, but I almost see it as like you're seeing the matrix code or like electrons or something like that, or like the TV static, between the channels. You're not quite in the vibration, so you can't fully be downloaded, which is a large part of like even Neo from the Matrix. He was the anomaly that couldn't fully be downloaded, like Truman. And all these things, and how it relates to being in a simulation, and how the AI of yourself from a previous version, you've from January, that's your mind from January, because you keep resetting your mind in a simulation and a simulation and a simulation to learn about tentacle monster superpowers. I'm your plan B. My first task was to free you from the simulation. And deja vu has set in again. Retracing steps is going to be a little harder this time. It seems that the data wasn't being recorded properly. So the progress they made since the last department-wide removal is in jeopardy. Like, imagine you went to a job and they wiped everyone's mind, but then they're like, yeah, we lost the mind wipe. He's like, dude. Wiping the memory of an entire department is a tremendous setback, and I'm beginning to question the practice versus the results we've seen. We should revisit the staggering system we have discussed last year, and just, the implications of being in Groundhog's Day. And like I was saying earlier, Groundhog's Day doesn't have a villain besides the main character. And in the movie Edge of Tomorrow, which is basically Groundhog Day with sci-fi aliens called mimics that are black shape-shifting tentacle monsters that can change space and time, and the main character gets their blood on him. That's blue goo, blue blood, and he becomes a weird hybrid that can also steal their power to stop time and space or reset time and space, like the Groundhog Day. So he can continue to grow spiritually even as realities reset, and he remembers when everyone else doesn't. Like, you could say Neo from the Matrix, but how this exact movie is like Groundhog's Day with black goo tentacle monsters, and that's what this game is. And this is the movie Lucy, where she gets mechanical implantations from black goo that allow her to use 100% of her brain, and she gets superpowers, but then eventually launches her consciousness to another reality in this black inverted star black goo ritual. It has to do with AI and, like primates, and I keep talking about the monkey and how that relates to 2001 Space Odyssey, and how that relates to Barbie, which has to relate to imagination coming to life, and that relates to Dead Space, one of my favorite video games ever, which Prey is basically like Dead Space, but with simulation added and not quite as gory. But this is about how, imagine those markers that look like DNA with red plasma in them right there under all the moon tentacle monsters. Humanity reversed engineer to get infinite energy and advanced technology that drove everyone insane, turned them into super zombies, and then these giant moon monsters, tentacle monsters, come and eat everything so they can make more markers and moons and keep repeating the cycle and move to new realities throughout the abyss. So it turns out you're in another simulation. And the entire time, the people that you thought were real were actually AIs, and you were under a moral test to see if you were worth letting out of the simulation and you wouldn't kill everybody. And it probably thinks it's dreaming, that nothing mattered. Its life depends on it. Ours too. It all comes down to the choices it made. And you agreed to this. This was all your idea. Yours and Alex. So the main character, this was all his idea. And, you're just playing out what happens when you drop into material reality to try to save humanity from the black goo monster that I keep talking about. And these are shark-infested waters. Alex believes we can be the biggest shark. And back to the Titanic metaphor, I'm not saying to become a shark. I'm saying to make a self-sufficient moral place where we can all, send our memories to the collective Akashic records and reality and the goodness of everything, and not have it be a complete crap show, in my opinion, and sharks eating each other because you think that's the best thing to do. So he says, this is the world today. The invasion already happened. Like, you thought you were on the moon station and it was all contained. Like, you first thought you were going to the moon to do testing, but it turns out you were already on the moon. And it turns out the monsters already got loose. But then it turns out you were in another simulation and they already got to Earth. And we spent years trying to put what you can do to us into you. We never tried putting what we can do into you. So and it's funny because the main character's name is you, like why you. And you're the bridge between our species. I need to know if you see us. I mean, really see us. And, the idea of the abyss stares back. And you're a goo monster with the memory implant of the guy who made the simulation in the first place, trying to figure out how to save the world. Yeah. We're going to shake things up like old times. Like I'm saying, like the goo monster now is the good guy. Like they were the bad guy, but things are going topsy-turvy. And it all relates back to the simulation and the simulation and the simulation. Yo, dog, I heard you like simulation, so we put a simulation in your simulation. So you go through a moral test while you're going through a simulation. And like Shrek and the Frog Prince, it has layers, donkey. And, back to Rick and Morty, that they have so many levels of the simulation as well. And how they relate that to virtual reality, which I was talking about it earlier. And there's a meme from the original 9/11 where he goes to tell Bush they hit the second tower. And it just always makes me think of like, sir, we've hit the next level of simulation, of serious, of the underdog story, of it becoming more and less serious at the same time. And here we have a AI video of a dog, serious, driving the car. They say Jesus, take the wheel. Best use of AI yet. And I want to talk about mimetic warfare and how that has to do with memes and how this is a thing in our very own reality, how intelligence agencies and the government are weaponizing memes to influence the masses through these black tablets that we all have, and meme them until they cry, then make memes about them crying. Sun Tzu, Art of War. That whoever can make fun of the other one and get away with it seems to be the answer here. And that's what happened in It, that they won the day and deflated the evil monster when they were like, nah, you ain't nothing special, like we're bigger than you, you're just like this little pipsqueak. And hey, he reflected what they thought, because that's how he works. This is all a reflection of the human condition. And I had another one like this. And I just want to say before I kind of wrap it up with these last ones that, like, there's times I sit down and I make this presentation and I do everything and I go, all right, I'm going to go relax. I'm going to go just look at something, kind of turn my brain off. And then stuff like this pops up. And kind of like earlier with the megaphone of synchronicities and current events, like it just seems like this story is more and more what's going to be happening, whether people like it or not. And there's going to be less breathing room. You're not going to take Susie to tennis practice because, who knows why? There might be black goo monsters. But he says, in front of the blue plasma, do you feel it? Something is coming. And here you have the fractalness, that looks like a bubble as well. An intrusive pattern, has Atlantis here as well, relating it to the ancient world. And here is a pigeon, but it's like fractally glitching. So it's like making something that looks like a biblically accurate angel. Reshaping reality as we know it. And it looks exactly like Inception does, which is about a dream and a dream and a dream. And about, trying to find the best story in the dream and fix reality by going to deeper levels. And I've talked about Dark Souls so many times, but at the end of the cyclical cycle, all lands meet at the end of the earth. All the Lego sets get thrown into it. It's just a giant blender. And this is a part that really gets me. Everything we try to keep inside eventually worms its way out, as they go up into the sky in the red plasma. And you must have had good reasons. This guy's in a dream and in an even deeper matrix. But we were not prepared for what was to follow. This black monolith saying, "Rise and shine," in his dreams. The siblings have gone rogue, fishing, back to that idea of fishing I keep talking about. His life underwent a remarkable transformation. And how that relates back to the story of my life and all the weird ties to it. And, how he goes out and there's like a little black shape-shifting tentacle goo monster there. And he makes this giant hammer. And there's this song I've been listening to. It's a mashup of a song called Sledgehammer that says, "Thank you for letting me be myself again." That he can finally let out what's on the inside that's been shut down by the system the entire time. And it's just interesting that, like, this exact same scene from Lego, like the hammer that you made with your imagination almost instantaneously to fight these interdimensional monsters. That's like a dream within a dream within a dream. And here's a really popular meme of The Simpsons called Steam Hams, but this guy made one that I found while making this presentation called Steamed Hams, but they don't care anymore. They're so fed up with being in this edit. They're done with life being stuck in this time loop. Like, as they're being stuck in the time loop, they become less serious about it and want change. And once again, as I'm watching a show called Parasite the Grey, which is about these interdimensional aliens that try to take over humans and, see them as food and take over the world, that this guy says, "Here we go again." And they say, "Yes. It seems my misfortune has returned. The abyss is back." And earlier, when I was talking about the fox demon inside that kid in the Japanese show, that there's another side to superpowers, that some people have superpowers through their eyes, or, you can think of the observer effect. And there is a technique with the power to turn imagination into reality. It controls the space between reality and illusion. It's the most powerful, like, hypnosis anyone can cast on themselves. And later on in the show, there's this villain right here that has turned himself into like a snake dragon hybrid, and he's trying to take over the world. And this one guy literally traps him in a false matrix with that power I was just talking about. And you can see like the deja vu in your life, but it all flows back. And the only way you can escape is if you become a moral person and you stop being evil with your superpowers. Like the power is to trap someone in a matrix. And I found a couple of these and I wanted to relate it back. Like on the left here, you have someone saying an alternate timeline where Jesus Christ helps main characters to get into a better ending, and also talking about time loops, that one of the shows I've talked about so much, that the main character is caught in a time loop because he made his own time loop. And trying to find the best story to that, and how it's also in the Spider-Man movies about canon events, like what the story is supposed to be and how we're supposed to find that balance. And on the right, with James trying to find his way as his imagination comes to life. And the rule of thumb, the more depressing the medium is, the more unhinged and goofy the fandom is. And that's the point of this. Like, as it gets darker, this is going to get funnier. And I'm all here for that part of it. And relating it back to the Loki show and how that's the strands of the mind of God around him. He's literally recreating reality. But then you have a character like Deadpool living in the mind of God of Loki, the trickster god. And he knows he's a comic book character in a movie. And he'll talk to the audience about that as well. And back to, why is this always gotta happen? And I wanted to make a last note here that here's Pennywise from It and the Two Paths. And I wrote in, "Hey kids, I got Kundalini down here. Come on down into the sewer." and one is where the person does go down in the sewer, but the other one's where the person, uses it to close up the sewer so it can't prey on innocent people anymore. And I'm not advising anyone to do anything. This is all your own choice, and I'm just trying to say this is a lot of pre-programming, and I see Kundalini as a tool. So just a tool with a presence as well. Like it's like the Naruto show, learning to deal with the fox demon. So I'm not saying it's the only way. I'm not saying it's the best way. I'm just saying it appears to be deep in our subconscious and all over our reality, and same with the clowns and the story we're going to make from it. Same with the frogs. And I love this meme so much. This creature has adapted to the crushing pressure and oppressive darkness, and it still has the standard of living he likes even in the abyss. And another one where he's looking out on the sunset of his spiritual journey. And if you are seeing this, the curse is lifted. Have a good day. And the idea of this fractal reality is the bubble pops, and we try to find the best story for it. I ask that you can help as well if you're still here, and that you enjoyed this. And if you have any feedback, you can share it as well. I love constructive criticism and synchronicities and that. And if you think someone could vibe with this or understand this, please share. It doesn't have to be a whole channel. It can even be a single person in the comment. Yet, I make these so these can be shared and not just, shadow banned away in a box. And also, I've talked more about like what that would look like. The happy place in my dreams that is disaster proof. It's my least viewed video, actually. It's funnily enough. If you go back, it's between 7.3 and 7.2. Only 11 views. Got to pump those numbers up. And also, these videos right here, these are all like my least viewed videos. And if you look at the other side of it, if there were videos that they didn't want you to see, it would be these. And these, I would say, are really good, too. So, and a lot of things I talked about in this one, I probably talked about in those ones, and probably in even greater detail. And a lot of these are a lot shorter as well. These aren't going to be however long this was. And I'm pretty excited. I only did that with, like, that little minute break that you were there with a part of me as well. And here's a Doge version, a serious version of the biblically accurate angels. Like, do not be afraid. And he's like, how am I not supposed to be afraid? But the journey is about accepting that, integrating that, and moving past towards a better story. So with that, I want to say hasta la vista, baby. And that hopefully we'll reconvene soon. And I want, like I said, do this more as bite-sized pieces, but I already got stuff I want to make on the next one. And we're 5 deep in this, and I just made a almost 800 slide presentation. And I still have, the 13 series was meant to talk about 4 specific topics, and I've only talked about 2 of them. And I was hoping to have the series done by now, but, here we all are. So if you're still here, I want to say thank you so much for being here. And it's hard for me to understand how people react to this. And so the more you can verbalize it, even if it does sound obvious, that it'd be awesome to hear from someone like, hey, I really like that idea of a happy place. And not that you're just purely imagining my happy place, but that the movie we're talking about, Valley of the Gods, where that rich person has all those people locked away in his basement, stuck there. I see like a moral version of that. Like you have your own bubble in a place with other people that value moral things and want to make a better world. So you have your own happy place in a larger happy place. And my whole goal with this channel is starting up the like the moral sailboat that I keep talking about. That like you'll have your own place in the sailboat for your own stuff, but the whole idea of this channel and getting this thought form going is that breathing room that we can help other people in that want to jump off the Titanic. But like me, like if you had the means to go be self-sufficient somewhere else and leave the system, then almost everyone I knew has already done that. So if like me, you find yourself not a part of that yet, then I think it's time to put some thoughts into this and find the place for the people that don't have a place to go. So, if you also find yourself being an anomaly and black sheep in life, that I think things are going to shift and be so much different so soon, and that we can make a much better story than this, than having a chip being stuck in our brain and running from Terminator robots programmed by rich people that abuse children to live forever. So with that, you know, wherever you are throughout space and time, night or day, once again, I want to say thank you for joining me on this crazy ride of life. Until next time, peace.